Betting, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the Bet with the Best podcast. Its mission is to explore better ways to bet on races, to seek out new, successful players, and to boldly go where no podcast has gone before. I am very pleased to announce that the Bet with the Best podcast has its first sponsor. And it's an ideal sponsor, Amwager, an ADW built by horse players for horse players. Amwager has all sorts of unique features designed to give you an edge when betting. For example, one of my favorite tools is the conditional wagering system that's lightning fast and lets you set the minimum price you will take on a wager, and then will fire off the bet at the last possible second, assuming the odds meet your minimum. We always talk about value on the Bet with the Best podcast, and this is a great tool for ensuring that you are betting only when you think you have an edge. It's great for win betting, but Amwager lets you apply it to other pools as well, such as exacta and trifecta wagers. Another tool that I really like is the Dutch wagering tool that lets you weight your bets rather than simply boxing a set of horses. We've discussed on Bet with the Best podcast the strategy of tossing a weak favorite and boxing several other horses in exactas and or trifectas and supers. And this tool lets you do that in a much more efficient way than a simple box. Yet another cool tool that Amwager provides is a fair value exacta grid. On Bet with the Best, we've talked about how sometimes there will be significant discrepancies between the win pool and the exacta pool, particularly at NYRA tracks where the computer teams are in one pool but not the other. This tool will flag such discrepancies and help point you to possible underlays and overlays. We've also talked about with computer model players on Bet with the Best, and Amwager has another great feature for those of you who are using computer models or thinking about doing so. That is the ability to wager by file upload. You can quickly upload a large number of wagers using a simple CSV format. Those are just a few of the many special features that Amwager has to offer, along with live video and race replays, free integrated form-to-win past performance information, and much more. Amwager is licensed and operated in the U.S., and best of all, they will actually pay you to play. If you sign up now and deposit and bet $150, then you will earn a $150 lump sum bonus. So there's no reason not to give Amwager a try. If you want to bet with the best, then you need the best tools there are to wager with. You need Amwager. Welcome to episode 13 of the Bet with the Best podcast. I've been really looking forward to this guest. He's a longtime professional player and an NHC champion, and is always willing to share his insights with fellow horse players. I'm happy to introduce Paul Mattias to the show. Hello, Paul. How's it going?
Okay, Chris. How's it going?
Great. Like I said, I've really been, I've been trying to get you on this for a while. Haven't been able to coordinate the schedules until now, but better late than never. So I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, I landed right on 13 with the unlucky 13.
Lucky.
That's what I need. I need something to change my luck, so that's good.
My daughter's
a lot of
birthday.
Photos.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
My daughter's birthday is on the 13th, so it's her lucky number. So.
Right. So 13's lucky for you. So maybe it'll rub off.
There we go. So you've heard the show. So I like to start with what I call the horse player origin story, how you got started in the game, and kind of how that led to where you are today. So hopefully you can, share whatever part of that story you'd like to, because I'm sure the listeners will be interested.
Yeah, well, I have a long history. But you know what? My families were just, both sides of my families went to the racetracks, but we really weren't like so-called into the track or anything like trainers or anything like that. So it was just as fans. And the weird thing would be is when I was a kid, like we could go to a track and it was possible that like all my whole family would be there. It's not just like one person. That was the difference, I guess, for me, that just racing was part of everybody's life. But it wasn't, I don't come from a line of professional gamblers either. So so it's kind of that. I guess that's probably a pretty normal thing in general, that people who kept playing horse, especially back when I was a kid, that there was a lot of people who went to the track. So I had both my grandfathers were completely different at the racetrack, so I got two different ways to look at racing, which was nice. That my grandfather on my father's side was more of an action guy. He didn't particularly like the handicapping part of it, and my grandfather on my other side only liked the handicapping part, and he didn't really like betting. So it was I got to see from both ends of the spectrum, really, on that and that sort of thing. But even like my grandmother had a phone a bet account, and I said this at the NHC. When I was like 12 years old, I would call my grandmother from school, and she'd put in my doubles and stuff. I think you had a similar story, didn't you, Chris?
Well, my grandmother, she was the one who taught me how to play poker.
Oh, poker. Yeah. Right.
So
that's kind of where that's my origins of racing. I kind of the thing that was always for me was I didn't think I would definitely be a professional handicapper or anything, but I always felt like the racetrack or an OTB or anything to do with horse racing, I was at home. Like I had that feeling from a very young age, and I loved the racing form and the old formats, the big racing form. The ink would get on you. I just absolutely love. I mean, I'm a numbers guy, and I used to like sports statistics when I was little with baseball and stuff. So that sort of stuff, just really drew me in, and I just felt comfortable at the races. Didn't matter if we sat in a clubhouse or in the infield, wherever we were. It was always at home. So in that sense, it was a place that I knew I would want to go. It just felt right. You know what I mean?
It was kind of a family affair. It wasn't like a family business, but it was family affair. You had family members all across the board that were that were at least interested in racing and participated as players. So
yeah, without a doubt. And then what happened was my brother decided that he wanted to be a trainer, and that kind of was a weird thing because when I was 16 years old, he couldn't drive, so we ended up working at this training center that was about 40 minutes from my house, and I had to drive him. So that was part of the deal where I had to go work at this training center, and that was my first thing where I actually worked with the horses. And they put up with me so that they could have my brother, who was a great horseman, even at that age. He was he stepped right in there with the trainers and stuff, and that was a good learning experience for me. It was a little weird. We had some of these Irish trainers that were training the horses and they had this idea that you couldn't use a shank. So I've never been with a horse, and the first day they got me walking horses just by the halter, and that's and 2-year-olds. We were in the 2-year-old barn mainly. We had some layups and 2-year-olds, and so that got me thrown right into the horse thing. And I've been telling the story because my friend in the story has been coming to the races more this year. I hadn't seen him in years, but. So we would play baseball at night. I played in these would become these travel league baseball. So it kind of worked out good. So we didn't have to feed. We didn't have to come back because I had to play baseball. But a lot of times we'd go right from the barn to Saratoga if we were playing anywhere near it, or if we played anywhere near a track, we would go there first and then play the baseball game. But most of the time there was this OTB that was right by the home field that we played in, and I've been telling this story. If you want me to tell it, it's pretty funny.
Yeah, go ahead. Let's hear it.
So we go to the OTB, and I'm the only one. Like I said, I'm the only one that could drive. So I play a pick 3, and back then that was the big horizontal bet, races 5, 6, and 7. I think it was at Saratoga. And I get alive in the first 2 legs with like 40-1 and 20-1. And batting practice is going to start before the 3rd leg. So I told the guys that we're not going. I'm watching this race. You know, I was alive. This is the most I've ever been alive for by a mile. And then, as it turns out, of course, I lose the bet. So we go to the practice, and they were just kind of finishing up in batting practice, and the coach benched the 3 of us because he had seen my car at the OTB. And so you know, my brother and the other guy are really upset at me, you know, because now I'm still mad about losing the race, and now I've been working all day, and now the game, we had to sit through this game that our team had a 1-hitter against us in like the bottom of the 7th or the 9th, whatever we were playing. And for whatever reason, the coach decides to put the 3 of us in the last inning, and he put me 3rd in the lineup. So long story short, my brother gets a hit, the other kid gets a double, and I knock them both in. And then we ended up winning the game 3-2. And we had batted we batted 1 time in the bottom of the inning. And it was like it made like the worst day ever. You know, it just turned around. And today I still talk about. So that's why I thought it was funny story to say.
So you were the hero. You became a degenerate and a baseball hero all on the same day.
Right. And the weird part was that the coach yelled at us after, which was like he put us in, but he still wanted me to teach me a lesson not to bet. So he was yelling at me even after we won the game, and it was just a strange day that I still remember. And
obviously, it didn't have the desired effect. That wasn't the last time you went to the OTB.
100% no.
All right, so that's
and then as my life moved on, one summer in college I worked as a teller, so I got to see a totally different aspect of different people bets. I think that helped me at the time. I started to realize how people bet, and that was a big factor in that. Watching every single person come up, and the ones that won had a certain style of betting, and they bet, pretty much into a format, and that was really important to me, at a young age to see some people win. I cashed tickets for people that made lots of money, so that the idea that nobody wins, was soon erased from me. Even though my father was pretty good, and he still is, and he still was a really good handicapper. It was really good to see, somebody hit, for thousands of dollars, or somebody, how they came up with the triple, how they put the sequence together. And that had a big impact on me as well.
So we'll keep going, but I had 2 questions on you started out, you had some experience around horses at a training center. Just curious, what were the things that you learned from that experience that helped you as a horse player? And then maybe a little more specific about, what you got out of, being a teller and seeing thousands and thousands and thousands of people bet, some winning and some losing. So just a little bit more specifically what you got out of those 2 things that helped you as a horse player.
Well, like I said on the teller, I really got to see, how the people who lost, that they would bet pretty poorly. They would spread crazy, and they would make just big mistakes. And yet the people that would win had these, they would play a key with 3 horses, and they would play with the exact, and they would play basically the same amount. If they cashed, they came back and they played it the same way. As far as being around the horses, I just thought that being around the horses, I got to know, some of the things why a horse would run bad, or how a horse could improve, and that sort of thing. And I had another opportunity. All this happened to me in a short period of time, but I got to be a jockey agent when I was 23 years old for a summer too. And I got to spend a lot of time with some other trainers besides my brother. And that was really good too, because that was more so than working with the horses, because you got to see why a trainer might do something, like a trainer pattern, where I would know maybe how my brother would do it, or a trainer that my brother works for. I kind of knew their operations, but I really got to see a lot of different operations and trainers and what their aspect was and what they thought they would do. I had this crazy trainer. Well, this one didn't help my handicap, but it's pretty funny. I had a trainer that told me one day, never finish fourth. Tell your jockey, never finish the fourth. And I couldn't figure out why, but it was a strange thing. It was back in the days where the Greeks would bet against the Italians and bookmakers, and they had these bets that they would bet against each other. And it just led me to believe that some of these trainers have some different goals than just not necessarily shady, but just how they went about it, to get where they wanted to be, to get from A to B. A lot of different trainers had a different way of getting there. They might have all been successful, but it was a different way to get there. And it really helped with like trainer patterns and trainer intent, what they were after. And especially at the time, that really helped me too, into the aspect of like trainer betting and that sort of thing, and form and logic,
So as a jocks agent, you have to apply your handicapping skills there, right? Because I mean, depending on who the rider is, sometimes you're just hustling for any amount you can get. But if you have a rider that's fairly much in demand, you've got to make a lot of decisions about who you want to ride, right?
Yeah, I was more of I had to hustle more than what on the job that I was doing. But I got to watch some of the other agents and, talk to them and see kind of what the moves they would make, and I really, I was paying attention all along. By that time, I kind of had an idea that I wanted to gamble more. I knew at that age, I didn't want to get into corporate America. That was the last thing I wanted to do. And I graduated from college, and I wanted to do the horse racing thing by that point. So I was really trying to come up with any angles I could at that point. And, you really see how, especially back then, that nowadays it's a little bit different because of they draw so far in advance. But when you had to honor calls and you'd figure out why a guy would ride a horse and not another, or I'd figure out why jockeys would ride for certain trainers and that sort of thing. And, the moves became real easy for me to, like there was a race the other day where Irad had ridden the horse for Dutrow, the White Aberio. And like 3 days later, he didn't take one of the Dutrow horses, and Saez was on it, and Irad rode a horse that didn't make any sense, and I couldn't make heads or tails of it. So I know that things are changed because that and the horse that Irad took off, and Saez rode won. So I think that maybe these agents nowadays get stuck so much because they got to enter so far ahead of time, and I don't think it's quite the same as it was back then, but it definitely helped at the time.
So you had a pretty well-rounded education. You were around the horses, and you got some of that hands-on with the horses. You got to hear take bets for a long time, and got to see the good and the bad there. And you were a jockey's agent. You got to spin a bunch of trainers. Not just kidding.
Yep. Yeah.
But
they spun me more than I spun them. But yes.
But
and then to throw it all in together. I mean, I was very lucky when you look back at it. But I was also kind of driven to do things. But I also was very lucky in the fact that my father was friends with Mark Hopkins, who used to do his own speed figures before Andy Beyer, and then they kind of partnered up and doing figures when I was growing up. So, and they were really horse racing buddies, and they would go to the races all the time, and I would tag along with them whenever I could. And, they really didn't they wouldn't instruct you how to handicap or anything, but I just watched. You learn by watching, and the two of them couldn't be more different. My Mark Hopkins was very into speed figures and that sort of handicapping, and my father was more of a conditions and logic and doing the like the stuff that I was talking about that I would learn more with the trainers. So I really was lucky. I mean, right from my grandfathers right through to my father and Mark, I had a lot of influences where people that weren't so-called professionals, but a lot of people who knew what they were doing, a lot of people that were around racing. So, in retrospect, when I think about it, I said, it was almost like I was driven in this direction to bet horses. And I got to meet people like Pete Axthelm and Andy Beyer and, just being around, and Harvey Pack, just being around those people at a very young age was also, very enlightening. And as I got older, I could see through these other experiences what maybe they were doing that I could do a little bit different, or I could combine this from them and this from somebody else. And just to I'll give you an example. I should have said this at the beginning, but in the Andy Beyer's book, My 50,000 Year at the Races, there's a chapter about the Great Barrington Fair, and it starts off when I met Mark and Chick. Well, the Mark and Chick that he's talking about in that book is Mark Hopkins and my father, who's known as Chick. So
I
as I
never
can say,
picked up on that. That's cool. I've read the book and I remember that that part.
Yep.
So you did
so
end up actually doing some figures for Beyer for a while, right? Too?
Yes, I did. I did work for Andy. I got that was another thing that happened, that the Racing Times happened around this time frame, which was really good for me because I got to do the speed figures for Racing Times. I didn't get paid a lot to do it, but I didn't care. I loved doing it. When I first doing it, when we did it with Briss, I did it for free, which led to me to get the job, which was I just wanted to be around doing figures, and that helped me too, because I ended up doing all the bad tracks in the country, so I ended up doing a lot of work on speed figures. I mean, and I still do to this day because it kind of ingrained with me at that time to do as much as you can, because what happens is if you're doing figures, and you and I have talked about this, you've given me some ideas on this, but as you do figures, you could kind of learn why a horse ran good or bad on this day. You're almost forced to do it. You got to go back and look what happened in this race. Why is this race slow, or why is this race fast? And you got to make some of those decisions. And I got to do that for 20, 30 tracks a day, for five or 6 years. That's a lot of figures. That's a lot of work. And so again, another thing that kind of helped me, it's like all these little things that when you look back, there was almost like there was no other choice.
Yeah, it's almost like if you were going to say, all right, how would we build a career curriculum for someone to become a horse player? Well, let's get them some hands-on training with the horses. Let's have them work as a teller and take bets. Let's them be a jock's agent and hang around the backside all day, and then learn about figures and do that for a while. So yeah, you're right, and just hanging around the track with people that have been successful, that you can kind of see what's making them successful. So yeah, it does sort of sound like you were destined to become a professional horse player, whether you knew it or not.
Right. But then even so, it was, it wasn't easy at the beginning. I came up with some rules that when I really started to take it serious, I really wanted to work on the betting part. Some of these podcasts and people come on and talk about, it's impossible to say, how much of gambling is handicapping and how much of it's betting. I just find like there's always handicapping, even in betting. I guess that's the way to put it, So I don't like to say that. I don't like when people say, if you know how to bet, well, then you can beat anything, because that's not true. I mean, I know how to bet. You know how to bet. I'm not going to go to running aces and harness track and beat it the next day without learning how to handicap it. It's there's definitely a balance there, and that's the one thing that like on some of these podcasts, I think maybe somebody might get the wrong idea that all I have to know is how to bet, and that's not necessarily true. You definitely have to have that mix, and I'll give you some examples. What I was thinking, like, all right, so obviously one of the things you can want to do is find to beat favorites, but like when American Pharaoh was running, I somewhere along the line I figured that Keen Ice was very close to American Pharaoh, and I just said Keen Ice is going to beat. I said this to my son one day. Keen Ice is going to beat American Pharaoh one day. I think it was maybe after the Belmont, and he looked at me like I had, two heads, and said, you could tell but I explained it to him, and he really, understood what I was saying. And as it turned out, that was the move that made me money later on, But you got to have the handicapping part to know to go against American Pharaoh with the right horse. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I'm just curious, what was it that made you so confident that Keen Ice would have American Pharaoh's number? Because I actually cashed the day he won too, but it wasn't because I thought he was destined to beat him. I just thought he had a shot.
I'm not saying it was destined to beat him. I don't think he was destined to beat him. It was like he could beat him. All right. So when you get that revelation that he could beat him, now when Keen Ice is 18-1 or 15-1, it becomes an easier idea to bet against American Pharaoh. You know what I mean? It's like, using an example from this year, right? If you made the mistake in the Derby of saying that Hit Show could beat the best 3-year-olds, after the Derby, and I heard the arguments of some of the people who did, and I didn't believe so. But if you did think that, right? It's the same type of idea, but it's a wrong handicapping. So like, Hit Show was been a big price in the Belmont and the Jim Dandy, and he blew both times. But it was like, it's the poor handicapping, not the bet against. You know what I'm saying? It's they're intertwined. You just can't say I'm going to bet against all these favorites. And I did this a little bit when I was first started betting. You get the idea that I'm going to bet against almost any favorite I can, and I think that can lead to mistakes. Now, what it can do is it can lead to you, betting the bad favorites all the time can lead into some habits too. I mean, it puts yourself in good situations. The good mindset, of course. You want to. That's one of the primary things you want to do every time you open up a form. But you can't just like automatically go there. And I think sometimes when people talk about how to bet, it becomes too simplified that you have to bet against this favorite like every time, And I think that the handicapping, it's almost like a contest, Chris. I think contests are kind of the same way. Kind of why I, as a gambler, still like contests, because the contest becomes, is this a favorite I should bet against, or isn't it? Like that's like the contest to me. Sometimes you don't always guess the right ones, or whatever, but that part of handicapping to me is really important. Is deciding, is this the right way to bet against, or isn't it? And that's to me that's more handicapping than betting per se.
So let's talk about the betting part of that, though. So what you're saying is you shouldn't just automatically try to beat every favorite. That's probably not the best way to go. There's going to be some times when you think the favorite is strong, maybe not playable from a value standpoint, but really there's no value in betting against him. I think
Yeah,
I hear what you're
typically.
saying.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
exactly. Yeah.
uh,
Well, I think there's three. There's three distinct possibilities.
all right.
There's you like a favorite and he can't lose. You know, I had a theory. When I was going really good, and this is when I know I'm going good. I have these like built-in safeguard things where am I handicapping good? And one of them was if I bet a favorite, especially particularly a short one. It used to be like 9-5, but nowadays it's you know it's 9-5's value or 9-5's long shot nowadays on some of these tracks. But you know, if I bet a horse like that and he didn't win by open lengths, my mind I would always say is I made a bad bet, even if the horse won. You know, I I tried to keep that safeguard because I have these three different compartments. You're betting a favorite that you don't think it can lose unless something crazy happens. You have a favorite that I don't want to bet against, but I don't want to bet on either. And then you have the other situation. I have a favorite that is vulnerable, you know. And I think if you can the handicapping that goes into putting those horses in those three different compartments, I think could be the most important thing, but it's certainly extremely important if you're going to be a successful horse player.
So I
And
really like that.
I think a lot of people just go directly to the vulnerable, you know, or you see people that like to play favorites kind of go the other direction and just always like the favorite. I think the mindset is to use your handicap and to put you in those three spots. And that's what I like about contests too, because I think to win in contests, you have to be able to do that. I mean, you don't have to if it's a 10 race contest, you can get lucky. You know what I mean? You just bet against them all and, it might fall right. But but in a long contest or, long-term contest, I think the people that can do that will win the most in the long run.
So I like that. You kind of start your handicapping, it sounds like, with the favorite, trying to put it in one of these three buckets. Either it's a can't lose type, it's a don't want to bet against it, don't want to bet on it. There's no value there, but there's no value playing against it either. And then number three, this is a vulnerable favorite that I want to try to beat. So you have those three buckets, right? Does
Yeah.
that sound right? That I catch?
Yeah, the middle bucket I would say also could be the middle bucket could also be I don't like the favorite, but I don't like anybody else either. But you know what I've noticed in my life is when I do that and I think the races like that, usually the favorite wins. But I usually don't bet them. I don't bet anything in the race usually in those cases. But I've just noticed that when I get into that mode where I can't come up with anything, but I don't like I don't particularly like the favorite either. It's kind of like the favorite prevails, there's not a lot of value in the race anyway. Probably when it's all said and done.
But there is sort of a fourth bucket where you don't. One is you think the favorite's pretty strong, but there's not value in betting on him, but there's really not value betting against him. Or you don't necessarily think he's strong, but you don't really have an opinion in the race at all, right?
Well, yeah, I would say that, especially now. I think back in definitely before the rebates and CRWs got stronger, and even a little bit in the early times of the rebates. I think if you had that feeling on a favorite, there's value somewhere. That's the next question. Like if like what you're saying, I'm not going to bet the favorite maybe to win, but that's where I'm going to try to go for. The next questions start coming up. Where can I get value with this favorite? Is there a way to? Do I not like the second and third choices? In the exactas and tries. Do I not like the favorite in the double? Do I like the sequence in a pick 3 or a pick 5? That sort of thing. But I think that's that's kind of where you just go to the next step. And on the one you're talking about.
Okay, so I kind of like to talk about all how you deal with each of the buckets. So first of all, just you might not be able to answer this, but like how do you think things when you look at 1,000 races or 100 races, let's say, how many of them tend to be the can't lose favorites? How many of them are the favorites you want to bet against, and how many are in that middle bucket typically?
That's a good fucking question. I probably should. I should probably study that more. And try to do a better job of maybe analyzing the analyzing. um, you know, I don't know. That's a good question. I'm not sure I can answer that one.
That's fine. I just thought you might have a feel for that. All right. Well,
Yeah.
so regardless of that, let's just start with each one and talk about what you typically do. So let's go with the first one. It's a favorite. Looks like you can't lose. I mean, you can't lose unless something unexpected happens. So when you say can't lose, like what kind of probability of winning are you thinking? I mean, it's not 100%,
Exactly.
obviously.
Well, I mean, like I told you before, I have this safeguard. I would think that it's way more than the odds. I mean, it's
Right.
in the simplest form. But I think if you can start measuring how good you're doing when on measure on those horses is not just win or loss. It's not just even ROI or how many you're winning on that sort of thing. It's like, are you right? I mean, if that horse doesn't win by 5, like when I'm rolling good and something like that, that horse is going to win easy, or he's going to get left and still win. I mean, that's kind of that's what I want to see. I want to be shocked when he loses. On a horse when I'm in that kind of mode.
So how short of a price will you take on a horse like that? And what's
like I said back in the day, yeah, it's definitely shortened, but I don't know. I may not even be shortened, but I think what I on those type of horses, what I'm talking about is, between 4 to 5 and 9 to 5, somewhere in that range.
And are you betting them to win, or is that
I could have the same feeling about a 50 to 1 shot. You know what I mean? So it doesn't, the feeling doesn't, have to be just to the favorite. You know what I'm saying? Right. But I just in general terms, what you're asking,
yeah,
I'd still bet him if it was 4 to 5 or 9 to 5.
Yeah, I didn't mean that they were all in that. I just curious how low you would go. How confident are you when you have that feeling on a horse? It sounds like you go down to maybe 4 to 5. That's typically for a win bet we're talking about, right?
Yeah. So, and like I said, even if I don't, I'm kind of forced. We kind of veered off the topic a little bit on some of these other things, but betting gimmicks and stuff. We didn't really get into it yet, but with betting and with rebates and the way that the betting went in the last 20 some years, you're kind of forced to bet gimmicks because the best deals aren't to win. So even if you are betting to win, you're still fiddling. You're still trying to churn as much as you can on the other spots. So it's I'm not kind of like bound to where I'm looking at it and just to play win. I think it's layers, values on layers. That's why I don't really want to go, get pigeonholed there on that stuff, because what I was talking about before, it's like second level. Value can come anywhere. Like if you unfortunately nowadays with favorites, kind of the value has disappeared on the long shot, especially the short fields. But you can find value in exacta with a short price horse, or you can, because you don't like other horses, or if you've got a good feel that the other races they're wrong here. They're all coming out of 3 races that 3 horses are coming out of a similar race, and I think that race is terrible, and I'm chucking them. Or the favorite's coming out of a race with 2 other horses, and I think he can't lose, but the other horses are kind of value because they got beat by the favorite, but they're out of the best race. So there's secondary value to and third value, and depending on how many, where you're playing how many levels you're playing at in the gimmick.
So it sounds like if you have this where you have a horse that you call it the can't lose horse, you're not really saying it can't lose, but it's really likely to win. You'll play the win if you can get odds of that you think are at least 4 to 5, but sometimes you might be getting a lot higher than that. It's not just limited to that. But then you're looking to how else can you leverage that? And you'll look in the vertical plays, it sounds like, if you've got an opinion where you can get past the second or third choice in exactas or tries, you may do
Yeah, I think
that.
that's where the real value is. Without a doubt, I think that's where the real value is. So you've got in this mindset that this horse can't lose, but if you can out handicap everybody else in the other places, and you have opinions that are so-called secondary in maybe a double or a pick three, that single or that key on the standalone can lead to the multiplier of the value somewhere else. So it's just not the value in the, a lot of people always talk about just value in the win pool. I think the best value is not usually in the win pool. It's usually it's the secondary thing, or where you make that 4 to 5. I can make them 8 to 1. I can make them 25 to 1. Based on something else that's wrong in a different on a different level or a different pool.
And will you build out both ways, horizontal and vertical?
Absolutely, especially on a horse I think I can't lose. I'm going to try to get as much. I'm going to get down as much as I can on a horse like that.
And where do you typically see does the value on that kind of horse typically more on the? I guess it would depend on your opinion, but are you more likely to get past the second, third choice in the verticals, or are you more likely to find a vulnerable favorite in some of the adjacent races, or it just depends? I mean, I'm just curious, do you tend to lean one way or the other, horizontal, vertical, or are you just open mind and just take where
I'm open-minded from there? Yeah, I'm open-minded with what it brings, what the handicapping brings. And this is back to what I was saying originally. The better you can handicap, the better you can get, these tiered levels of value. If you're off and you're not handicapping well, you're going to miss. That's like the horse wins and I blow. That happens. But I'm willing to gamble that because the multipliers, are so much better. On the times you're right. And one thing we skipped over that I did want to talk about is, I have these kind of rules that that I had, and I actually think the most important rule in betting is that when you're right, you got to cash, and you got to cash strong. And I think some of the guys you've had on here, allude to that. Mike Maloney and the Hammer and a couple of these other guys that I know that have that way, and I think that's why they're successful, because that is the most important rule is when you're right and you're right about everything, you gotta cash, and you gotta cash big in those scenarios. So the win bet when I'm right on everything around that horse, and around the race or something like that. If I just got a win bet on a horse that I can't lose, I'm still mad. I know that's hard to probably for some people to think about, but if I get 6 to 5 on a horse that I can't lose and I'm right about everything, I'm going to be pissed off about it in the long run because I didn't cash enough. I didn't get long enough odds. I got to make that 6 to 5, 10 to 1, 20 to 1. Whatever I think the situation is given.
That makes a lot of sense. And when you say secondary and second and third order opinions, so the secondary opinion would be the exacta, the third level would be try, fourth level super, and same on horizontals, doubles, pick 3, pick 4. Is that what you mean when you talk about the next level opinion?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure.
So you really are building out. A couple of the people, the guests we've had really do this where they, like you said, find that horse they really like and then try to build out either in the verticals or horizontals or both. And it sounds like for these kind of horses, the can't lose type, that's really your mindset, trying to figure out how you can build out with secondary opinions that leverage that value. Like if you can beat, you don't want to go, chalk exactas probably. You're thinking, how do I get past that second or third choice and get some value in the exacta, right?
Yeah, and 100%. And you know, and that's a very hard thing. You know, it's easier said than done, and it's you know, it takes a little bit of, you know, where you can't just force it either. You know, so you gotta be true to your opinions and your handicap. And where, you know, again, I think when I first started, I would just automatically, you know, look for bombs on a horse like that. I'm just gonna just poke and hope almost, you know. Or I really don't like the second horse because obviously I don't, because I think the favorite can't lose. So I'll justify it by taking long ones, you know, for third, or, you know, I'll take the fifth, sixth, and seventh choice just because I don't think the second and third, fourth horse have a chance against the first. So that mindset might not work, you know. In fact, it probably won't in the long run because you're forcing it, you know. And that's again what I'm talking about earlier. That balance of let the your handicapping and your decision making dictate the betting decisions, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it sounds like you don't want to force it. So, like, let's say you have a horse that can't lose, and now you're looking for, okay, do I have some value in exacta pool? If you think the second choice is probably going to run second and there's no value in that exacta, you're not going to push it, right? Or you want to find some secondary opinion you think creates value and gives you, and that you can leverage that on. And if not, then maybe you look at the horizontals, and again, you look at an adjacent race, and it is, you know, the
Right.
horse is a pretty strong favorite, but there's no value. Does it really do much for you to play that double? Or are you going to force it? No, you're really looking, is there a secondary opinion that helps you leverage that value, right? Without forcing it, you know, thinking that you have to make every bet possible because you think this horse can't lose, right?
Right. And, you know, and that's that was a hard thing for me when, you know, like back when I was talking about when you're betting with a rebate, that became one of the hardest things for me, because when you're betting with a rebate, you're tempted with these. I got to play tries. I get more in the try. I get a bigger rebate. I got to churn more money, or I can take that short double because, you know, I'm getting something back. And I saw a lot of people, you know, when the rebates first started, that were, it sounds weird, but winning players without a rebate became where they couldn't win with it. I mean, it sounds stupid, but it's all the mental part, you know.
But it makes sense, because you were saying that you don't want to bet that pool unless your opinion says there's value betting that pool. You don't want to just bet it because you're getting a rebate. So I could see what you're saying could definitely happen. People think, wow, you know, I like this horse. I got to play it in every pool I can, right? You know, churn as much as I can.
And they had no opinions. They had no secondary opinions. They had no, you know, or their opinions, you know, or their opinions they forced were bad, you know, and they would just, you know, they would blow winners, and then, you know, the psychological stuff of betting sets in, you know, and you start trying to do something that you shouldn't be doing, and all of a sudden you're on a losing streak, and losing breeds losing, you know, and all of a sudden you say, well, how the fuck did this happen? You know, I was winning before, and now I'm picking winners, and I'm losing, you know, and it, you know, it sounds like it's far-fetched, but it happens, and it happens every day. And I'm kind of going through a little bit of that stretch right now, where I've had a lot of bad seconds. I've got a lot of bad beats too, but you know, that losing breeds losing thing is definitely true, you know. And even though, you know, I've won for my whole life, I'm never going to be a loser. I've won enough, and I've blown enough money that I'm never going to. I don't have enough money to blow back. That the doubts creep in on you, you know, like, you know, what am I doing wrong here? Am I not handicapping good, or, you know, and you know, so that's an important part too, where you got to, I think if you're handicapping right and you're true to yourself, you'll stay out of those modes as much as you can.
So that you mentioned these rules that you have, and you talked about one of them. You know, if you're right, you've got to really, you know, cash in. What are the other rules? Can you share the other ones that you've got?
I used to say this one as a you know, semi joke, but it was definitely the rule that I came up with, and I've seen other people say it, and they kind of bastardized it. But, you know, bet a little to win a lot I think is important when you're betting, where this is back to my teller days. The people who spread and tried to bet a lot of money to win a little, I always found, and I always found that they never won in the long schemes of, even in the short scheme of a day. And it's a little bit because when they were right, they didn't win. It's just a poor philosophy, and it's back to where we're talking about. It's kind of goes hand in hand with when you're right, you got to win. But also, I think it helps me sometimes in the sense of where I was going to talk about another thing, but it helps me where, like, bet sizing, like one of the things I came up with early on in my betting was that I had three ratios of the bet sizes that I would make. So I wouldn't make the same bet in every race. It would be based on my opinion. So like I had a 1-3-11 type of ratio, where if I was going to bet $10, 12 is probably a better number to start with, but let's just keep it simple. If I bet $10 in the first one, that would be a race that I had the least opinion, but enough of opinion to bet. In that sense, I'm still going to try to win a lot with that $10. I'm going to play something to where that $10 is going to get a lot of bang for your buck type of thing, And then the middle one would be probably the most bets that you would make would be in your middle range. So if that's your normal bet amount, you kind of stick with that normal amount, and you bet a little bit more. You spread a little tiny more, and I kind of have this other rule where I always say you should. I think about how when I make the bet, am I going to be mad if this result comes in and I don't cash, or am I going to be mad if I hit this bet and I don't make X amount of dollars? I kind of try to run those through my brain, and some of those are more in the middle ranges that comes more into play, where if I'll substitute, say I'm betting $30. I'll substitute the little bit of a profit. Like I'll bet this exacta where I'll get, if this comes in, I want to get my money back for 30. But if this one comes in, I want to get 500. And I'll sacrifice the $20 or the $30 on something to get to the 500. But I won't sacrifice it if it's going to be mad, if I'm going to be mad because of it. You understand what I'm saying?
So I think, you're making your bet and you've got a shorter price one and a longer price one. You're kind of happy to put it all in the longer price one, as long as you don't think you'll really regret that if it comes in the other way.
100%. You got it exactly right. So I'll go more money with the longer one if that's really what I want, when I think about it, and it helps you for making mistakes. Sometimes you can't go through this. My friend always tells me it's the worst bet in history, but this will tie in with a lot of things we've been talking about today. But I had a horse where I thought that couldn't lose, and it was back in, it was like a 6-horse field, and I played a $2,000 exacta 1-6, and the 6 was 100 to 1, I think. He was a real long shot in a 6-horse field, like 90 to. It was like, yeah, it was 100. It was more than that. It was 99 to 1, and I didn't reverse it, and it never even crossed my mind to reverse it. And the race came in, and the 99 to 1 shot beat the favorite, who was like 4 to 5, and I had a $2,000 exacta reversed on exacta that paid like 500. And I always remember that one, because I say, how stupid could you be not to cross your mind to say, am I going to be mad if it runs 6-1? You know what I mean? If you keep thinking that way, you can prevent those things from happening.
Yeah, I've done similar, but not to that extent. that would be pretty tough.
My friend always tells me that's the worst bet he ever saw.
All right, so I want to try to get through all your rules. Are there other rules? You've talked about, when you're right, cash strong, bet a little to win a lot, which is really don't spread unless you really feel like you regret it if you didn't include horses, don't include them. Go for where the value is. And then you kind of have a ratio of, kind of more of an action kind of bet, then you kind of typical bet, and then you didn't really talk about the high end. Those are the ones where you really is that where you really it's a can't lose horse, or is that where the value's just tremendous? I mean, what gets you to that third level of betting?
Well, I think it for every person's probably different, but yeah, but both of those, right? You got two examples. You got examples A and B in there, but I also think that number's got to be strong. The problem is, you don't want it to be where you're always betting that way, but you want to be aggressive in that spot, and you can't be, I thought the ratio kind of works for me because it keeps me so I don't get too aggressive. I'm kind of in that mode, but when I want to be aggressive, I got to go, it gives me a guide at least to where I'm going to go. And I always used to say it was like 11 plus, if you like it even more, keep sending on those, there's no limit really. If you don't want to go broke, obviously, but those are the ones you really want to be aggressive with, that type of thing.
And that's where you're like, those are your strongest opinions, cash, that you want to really go for.
Right. Right.
And
yeah,
I noticed
exactly.
you are a math guy because it's your sequence is prime number 1, 3, and 11. You didn't do anything
right.
boring like 2, 4, or 6 or something.
Well, and raising it is a little bit because, like I said before, it's kind of like a 10 isn't a good number, but in my lifetime, I was thinking about this today where, well, I'll go back a little bit. So the idea I think is that when you're winning, you should go incrementally up. But that doesn't mean that you hit one bet, you go up, in that ratio. But as you're winning, in a winning streak or something like 2 days, 3 days, you got your bankroll's going up, you got more money in your pocket. The ratio should go up, not one or the other, So like in my lifetime, I went from betting 1, 3, and 11, probably in my best bets, when I was 16, 18 years old, to where I was betting 1,000, 3,000, 11,000, So, but I went up incrementally. I didn't do it overnight, and now, I've kind of, that's the. And then the other thing is if you're losing bets, and this is an important one, but if you're on a losing streak, you got to simplify, back to what you were saying before. If I'm losing and I have one of those horses that I like, I might just take the win bet and just say, fuck it. I got to hit this one. You know what I mean? Like we got to get the ball rolling, or I might take and bet more win, or I take less gamble, I would in a sense that I was losing more, because I think it's a human nature to chase, so when you're losing, if you just think on a losing idea, I'm simplifying, you have a lot less chance to chase.
And you're reducing the variance, right? You're more likely to hit a win bet than exacta or a try or a double.
Right. And again, back to where the losing breeds lose and stuff,
So any other rules you had that we haven't covered that you said you had a set of rules you sort of developed early on?
Well, there was one rule that really is a tough one nowadays, but like I would say I tried to avoid short fields as much as I could, and I wouldn't play. And nowadays, I wouldn't make a bet if on some of these days. So that's a harder one to keep nowadays. I had some other interesting things that people might like, where in vertical bets, I would always, the max amount of horses I would use with a horse, I had the field size divided by 2 minus 1 there's some algebra for you. So like if the field size was 12, I would, the most horse I would use would be 5 with him. It's kind of like a max, like a max on the, and it just kept me in. If I thought that way, it kind of keeps you in. It's probably not 100% accurate math, but it keeps you in the right ballpark as the field sizes change.
So you're not using the all button?
No, for the most part, no. Especially in a vertical scenario, I would almost never use an all in a vertical type bet. With maybe the exception of superfecta, especially when superfectas were $1 and you had more value for using an all. Maybe in a scenario where on a ratio where I'm playing a real small amount to win a lot, and I'm doing a crazy bet where I'm betting 2 30-to-1 shots and I'm running them down in tries or something maybe like that, I would play an all, but never in the scenarios we've been talking about. In fact, in the scenario that you were talking about before with a favorite and a shorter price horse, my rule would always be the field size divided by 3. I would tighten it even further. It kind of just forced me to go, that's the max of horses I'm going to use. It kind of sets you it kind of sets a grid up for you in your mind, I think. At least it does for me, where it gives me a map of where the logic I want to go to,
No, that makes sense. And like you said, if you apply that to small fields, you got to be playing cold exactas and tries pretty much. Once the fields start getting pretty small.
Yeah, like in a field size of 6. You don't want to be using more than 2 horses in exacta. I mean, I don't feel like you should.
And you won't get an argument from me on that. So any other rules? These are great.
That's that's about all the rules, I guess. It's they're more guidelines than rules probably, but I call them rules.
Well, rules of thumb, like heuristics that you use. Like you said, they're not hard and fast, but they give you a sense of what works, kind of what boundaries you want to stay within.
Right.
All right. So we talked about the scenario where you got a can't lose. Let's go to the other extreme where you've got a favorite you really think is vulnerable and there's value. He's one you want to beat. How do you attack that typically?
Well, I don't know if it depends on like all right. So I'll give you some scenarios.
Okay.
If I get a horse that I think can't lose, who's not the favorite, that's going to it's going to gear you towards where it's going to be a high end bet, right? So like if I like a horse who's 10-to-1 and I think he can't lose, or he's a strong opinion, that's the type of horse where I'm going to be betting that 10 or 11 size amount. If I get to a point where I don't want to bet the favorite, but I don't really have a strong opinion, it could be, like I said before, where I got these inklings on some bombs. I'm not going to play the bet size of 11. I'm going to bet the bet size of the 1, or I got a key where I'm speculating on, I don't know, if it gets the lead, if it gets loose, I think if this horse gets lead, he might be tough. That would kind of make me be in the middle. I'm speculating because he could blow up if he doesn't make the lead, or vice versa. If this race goes hot and heavy, it might fall into his hands. That would probably be towards of a middle range type of bet for me.
So it sounds like if in the races where there's a weak favorite, you're probably looking to key some horse that you think might have value.
And if
it could be a long shot.
Yeah. And if it's not, it wouldn't be a big play. It just wouldn't automatically. I'm betting I think the favorite's vulnerable. I gotta bet 10 times on this horse because his favorite's vulnerable. Now I wouldn't. That's not an automatic. It you got to go to what your opinion is, you know, of the horses you're playing. Another reason
So
why I like the bet sizing, you know.
right. So you may not have you might not have a horse you can like that to key. There might be nothing in there that you really jumps out, long shot, mid priced or whatever. So in that case, where you think the favorite's weak, but you don't really have a key horse a horse to key around, don't have a strong kind of second opinion, do you just pass the race, or is that kind of, if you can't find that secondary opinion other than the
Well, I
favorite's
guess
vulnerable?
yeah, I guess if there's, you know, like you know, what we were talking about before, that would be like in that middle bucket. Probably no, but if there was enough opinion where I could, you know, I could see value if the favorite blew up. Say like if he's really overbet, you know, in a scenario where, I mean, I'll give you an example. It was a 3-horse race the other day at Saratoga, and I didn't like the favorite, but I didn't have a lot of opinion, and there wasn't a lot you could do. So I bet some doubles with the winner of that race, you know, and it was a kind of a middle play for me. Not that I loved the horse who won. It was the Todd Pletcher horse. You know what race I'm talking about? It was a 3-horse race that came off the turf on Friday.
Yeah, I remember that.
The horse was on the Derby Trail for a while, and you know, and that led to where I hit an okay bet, you know, on a double. In fact, everybody asked me that day. Where a lot of people came in and said, "Oh, this horse can't lose. This race is terrible," and I always said to them, I actually think the horse is vulnerable, but I don't know. It's a 3-horse race. I don't know. You know, that's what I said to everybody. So it wasn't like I was dying to bet against that horse, but I just felt the scenario was, again, am I going to be mad if that horse wins, you know, and I don't have anything going into the next race? It's kind of just where my logic went that day. And I said, I'm going to be mad, you know. Am I going to be mad if I bet this for a certain amount? I said, no, I got to bet it for a little bit more, you know, and it ended up being enough where I guaranteed that I was going to win for the day, you know. You know, it wasn't a score, you know, it wasn't anything that was going to change the day of the meet or anything, but it just a small opinion, you know, led to a good result, you know. Which leads me to another thing, you know. I was going to give you some examples of bad betting, but you know, bad betting sometimes can be just not betting at all. You know, I had a friend of mine that was a great handicapper who would sit and watch these races over and over and over again, and he would tell me what was going to happen, and he wouldn't bet it. And then he would bet, you know, something on an opinion that he had, and what he thought was a good opinion, you know, really wasn't his best opinions of the day, because he was kind of like married to this kind of scenarios of, you know, I got to bet this pinpoint type of horse. I got to bet him because he's 6-1, or, you know what I mean? He wasn't looking at the full picture, and his handicapping was too good for what he was betting, you know? So, and you know, I think that race would have been if somebody had a rule and said, you can't bet a 3-horse field, you know, it would have been you know, you would have skipped the race. And in fact, I almost did, just because it was such a shit race, you know, like such a meaningless thing, you know. But the process of going through everything led me to where I found some of the value, and my opinion led to me to the value.
And you did have to have a second opinion in the next race, right, in order to,
right,
to make that play.
Right.
If you
right,
hadn't,
exactly.
You might have just passed, right? Or unless you were going to bet to win. Did you bet to win in that case, or just a double?
Well, you know, he ended up drifting enough where you probably could have. You know, this is the modern day betting where, you know, it's kind of, you know, we're like in a chaotic thing where New York doesn't let the computer bettors bet the win, so the win pools get kind of funky. You know, you just don't know what's going to happen, and you know, and that was, I guess that could have been an example where you could have definitely bet the win because the way it led out. But my instincts are always to look for that secondary value thing. So yeah, you picked up on me. That was where my mind went.
So when you have a vulnerable favorite, you really do need a second opinion probably to get involved. Either someone you can key on in that race in verticals, or maybe a secondary opinion in another adjacent race or something. But it sounds like if you don't have some secondary opinion, just a vulnerable favorite doesn't really get you into betting those pools. And just to beat that horse, you've got to have that second opinion.
Certainly back in the old days, and certainly in the classic betting of what I've had, like the way the betting has gone now is that all this money has gone to these horizontal bets, which has led to me where I have to have more opinions. It's kind of like a contest, like you have to have an opinion in some of these races, where in the old days I could skip over a race like nothing, if, in the scenario that you're saying. But when you're playing in a contest, that may win that race might win the contest for you. So you got to dig deeper. And in a contest, you just might guess and take a guess. And it's kind of like, okay, but for me to make that bet, I probably wouldn't do it just to bet it. But in a contest, that initial opinion would steer me into to some place. And then on these horizontals, where I think they're a little like contests, you have to establish an opinion in each leg. Like there's no hiding in a pick five, So a horse like you're talking about, an example, becomes much more, a race that I have to be a part of nowadays, because I got to figure out how I'm going to play that race in a pick five. And that has been like a thing for me in this modern day betting that I've had to work on, and I even have to keep working on. And I'm instinctively doing some things better, but that's a tough road. Like today at Saratoga, there was a race that was a 5-horse field, and I didn't like the 2 favorites, and I didn't bet the race, but I bet the other 3 in the pick 5, and I just decided I'm not playing the other 2. I don't like them. If they win, I don't care. I'm going to, it's kind of a weird thing, because you don't pick up a lot, but you pick up enough to play a pick 5 in that scenario, especially with some of the other opinions you have. And I think that's the hard part, where you get forced into some of these situations that aren't in any of those boxes that we talked about earlier. You know what I mean? They're like, and that race could, like, just like the contest, that race could win you the contest. That race could dictate your pick 5. It could dictate your month. It could dictate your year. If you blow that race, you might blow, the score in a pick 5. And that mentality has been a little tough for me. And I think it's probably tough for a lot of people. And I think that's, like, the CRWs have an advantage on you in some of these other things. I don't think they have a real advantage on you in the pick 5s handicapping wise. Their only advantage is in scenarios like that, where the money can just dictate, and the math can just dictate what you're supposed to do in legs. And that's a very hard thing to do when you're betting part wheels, or you're just putting a ticket together by yourself. I think that's what makes the pick 5 and this modern day betting so difficult. But it could be so easy if you just land right. It's kind of like the contest thing. This contest could be real easy if I land right, But it also can be, very hard on you when you zig instead of zag a bunch of times.
Yeah, I like the analogy of horizontal bets being like contests full of mandatory races. you're forced to play those races. Where if you're a vertical player, you can, pick and choose what races you want to play. But if you're playing the horizontals and you're going to play the sequence, you got to play all 5 races. Now, you certainly can pass if you don't like, 1 or 2 races you have no opinion on, you don't think it's worth playing. But if you have really strong opinions in 3 or 4 of the legs, it almost, forces you into doing something with that race because, you have a chance at a really big score. So like you were saying, you've got to come up with some way of factoring those races into your play in an efficient way. And you probably don't want to be too spready because then you cut into your long-term profits, but you don't want to be too tight if you don't have a strong opinion because then you're creating another race you got to get through that could, blow the entire sequence, right? So that's what the dilemma you're dealing with.
100%, and like, I think if you're going to go with the mentality that you're going to play it like you're betting to win, you're going to have these scenarios where you're going to have long losing streaks, and you're going to blow a lot of them that you should have hit. If you're just going to like arbitrarily say, I'm going to, I'm throwing this one out and I'm throwing this horse out again, back to what we were talking about before. I'm just throwing them out just because. It's not because of my handicap and I'm throwing them out. I'm just throwing it out because I think I'm supposed to, and I think that, that leads to a lot of this, the zigging and zagging on pick 5s and in that scenario, it leads to losing and losing breeds losing. But the other way is zigging and zagging. And then you say, well, the woulda, coulda, shoulda comes in. And I think that's very difficult on, the modern horse players. My son loves these pick 5s, and I just see the torture in his eyes because he's always got to make these hard decisions, over and over again. And I don't like some of the habits he's getting into. He hit a couple where he kind of got lucky, and his habit is, well, I just gotta cut here. I gotta make this decision. I don't care what I like, because I'll ask him. I say, well, why'd you make that decision? He said, because I have to, and I don't like that, I don't think that's a proper long-term strategy.
Makes a lot of sense. So, so we kind of covered the favorite angle. Well, let's talk about where, we kind of hit on this, but like there's a horse you really like that's, not a favorite, but you think there's real value even in the win bet. It sounds like, just kind of talk about how you tackle that. I'm guessing you would tackle it the same way you do with a can't lose horse. This isn't necessarily a can't lose horse. Do you play a horse who you think that is maybe not the most likely winner, but offers a lot of value? Will you play those kind of key horses and play them to win?
Yeah, I guess that's a complicated scenario that happens where, in the old days, without the CRWs, those bets, they were rare, but a lot of, you could actually double key, in some of those scenarios where there was so much value you could double key. I mean, I remember I got bet in the Meadowlands harness in the 90s. It's a long story, but the value, they made so many mistakes on favorites, and there was so much value that you could double key in a lot of gimmicks, and there was still lots of value along the lines. And and then with the rebates, you could churn with the double key, and it kind of became like a crutch. I tried not to lean on as much as some of the other people that I know, but as time progressed and the value kind of disappears, you could see where that was a mistake. You're probably better off just pick a direction. I kind of really force myself in a scenario like that where I got to try to where I'm going to go. I will, in that scenario, always make a bigger box with the horse that I like the second. So like it's kind of where win if you're right. If I get 2 horses down, I might key a horse with say 3 horses or 4 horses if it's a big enough field, and then come back with the other horse and box with him strong, and then play tries with them where they run first and second or first and third, because the value's there in each pool, but I won't bet two horses to win. I won't double key anymore, but the duel of the two horses, I will gravitate to and actually look for that. And so like in that scenario, it's a little painful that you got to make some kind of decision, but it's a decision that you like because on those exacta boxes, when you hit those you're gonna, those are the scores. That's what we're talking about. That's why we're here.
So you're saying if there's two horses you like that you think offer value, you'll pick one as your key, but you'll press with the other?
Absolutely. Yeah.
But you won't typically now,
and
now you won't like double key or play them both, but you'll choose one, but you're going to press with the other. So if you're right about both and they hit, you get them in the exacta, you might crush the exacta and have the win and the try and all that, right?
Yeah, and and in this day and age where you have to play so much money in the horizontals, a scenario that comes up more for me is that I just play in the verticals. I'll just play the strong way, where I'm playing the box, I'm playing the two of them, and I'm going for that, and then I'll use the two I just use the two horses in the horizontal, where in the old days I probably would have made a decision to go to key. Kind of now where I won't go that route. I'll simplify. You know what I mean? I'll simplify. I'll go just for the box, especially if I can't get to a point where I like one better than the other.
So it almost sounds like sometimes you're playing the horizontals reluctantly just because there's a lot of money in those pools. The takeout. Well, I guess with your rebate. Yeah.
No, you have to. I think in this day and age you have to. You're forced to. I mean, look at today at Saratoga, the last race exacta. I liked the 8 horse. He was a 10-to-1 shot. He was a horse that probably in the older days would have been in longer than that. He was that long in the will pays. He was that long in the all the horizontals. He ran second to one of the two favorites, and the exacta paid $11. For a buck. I mean, this is a horse this is an exacta that in the old days would have paid minimum 40. I was talking with my brother. I don't know. I was thinking it could pay 80. I mean, the 10 got bet down a little, so he was saying so, but it's not going to pay 11. I after the race, I was walking back because I knew I had to do this with you, and I was left early, and I said, I should have played that. I played that wrong. I didn't have it for enough. And then when I found out that the exacta paid $11, my mind was, I shouldn't have played it at all. You know what I mean? I shouldn't have played anything on it because there is no value on it. And that's the stuff that's happening now. And this is what's happening with CRWs and the new world betting, that this is what's destroying it. This is the hard part because, people know what exactas they're supposed to pay. And when they're not paying what they used to, or they're not paying what you really think they're supposed to, you can't bet exactas anymore. I mean, it's just almost in my mind where nowadays I've had the scenario like all meat at Saratoga. Why am I even betting these exactas? There's the only thing I can do is just bet, straight on top and completely exactly what I want. That's the only thing that's going to make me mad. Back to asking the question. If I had other things going, so I didn't really pay attention what the will pays. I don't know if he went down. The exacta could have gone from 40 to 11 or 20 for $1 to 11 in the last flash. I don't know. It might have. I didn't have time to pay attention, but these are things that are going to make a horse player mad, and they're going to gravitate. It forces you to say, "Oh, fuck these exactas. I'm not betting this anymore." I'm going to play the. I saw that there was a lot of value if the 8 had won the last race. The double was paying good with the 9-to-5 horse that won the race before it. So I'm just going to stick to the doubles. I'm going to stick to the pick 5s. I'm sure if he had won, the pick 5s would have been full of value. So they're changing your whole mindset. You know, I say on some of these shows, we're in transition, both with the HISA stuff and with the CRW war or whatever's going on that's just destroying these vertical prices. You know, I'm not sure exactly what you're supposed to do. And when a person comes on your show in the last year and says, I don't know if I can beat this anymore, that's why he's saying. He sees these exactas and says, can I be this good? You know, and one of the mistakes I made early on when I'm trying to change my betting somewhat is that I said, I'm going to out handicap these computers, and I can do it. I can beat these exactas, and I can narrow them down and beat them, you know. And I found that it's too hard. You know, you lose too many photos. The losing breeds losing stuff comes in, you know. And I think everybody else is instinctively figuring that out. So you gravitate to the pick fives, you know. And unfortunately, that's the kind of the world we live in.
So when you were saying what you meant, you were like tightening your play so you spread even less, like you're just going with like your cold exactas or, you know, only, you know, minimal spreading.
Even like like what you were talking about before, even like a 10-to-1 shot that I liked, you know, in the old days, I would always box with the 3 horses, you know, or if I, like in the race today, if I keyed a 10-to-1, I think it was even longer than that when I played it. I'm using 2 horses. I'm gonna box the exacta, you know. And I think nowadays, even with a 10-to-1 shot, you shouldn't even box it. You know, there's like no value. I just saw it. There's no value in it. You know, there was a photo. I lost the photo for win. You know, all right, so the next one I'll win. I'm better off just betting when it's that big of a swing. You know, I still think that's probably the strategy with this. The people that I know that are winning are handicapping better than me, and they are playing in that manner. They're going to really blast. They're trying to outbet the computers because the computers aren't playing for scores. That's the other thing that drives me crazy is that it's really just a tote manipulation when it really gets down to it. They're not handicapping. So the rule of they don't bet a little to win a lot, you know, and that really bugs me somewhat because I know that's not right. That's not how you handicap to win in horse racing. It's how you manipulate a market. That's it. That's all they're doing. You know, these groups, they don't know the difference between Saratoga Harness and Saratoga Flats. You know, that was a question once that one of these guys asked me one day, you know, because they don't care. It's just the market. It's just the money. It's just the manipulation, you know, and, you know, I know they're part of the game and everything, but it just forces you into these tough decisions. And for me, it's been challenging and new, you know, more than that's not impossible to beat. Cause I know there's people that are doing it. They're just handicapping better than me, which leads me back to what I was saying before. The handicapping's got to be a factor, you know, and if you're handicapping good, you know, you could still beat them. And if you're making the right decisions, you still can beat them because they're not going to take a lot of money out of any pool. Even when they're playing the pick 5, they're not playing a little to win a lot in that. They're betting 50,000 to cash 50,000, you know. And if you ever saw some of these tickets, you'd say they're not handicapping. They're playing, you know, they're playing a ticket 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, and then they're playing another ticket 2, 2, 2, 2. You know, it's you know, it's kind of, it's not in the sense of handicapping, but you know, and another thing that again, I'm not against the CRWs in the sense that particularly the handicapping CRWs, you know, and I think there's still a lot of those out there, like the initial ones. The initial handicapping CRWs are different than the ones we're seeing now. You know, like the early models would use handicapping factors, You know, they still ran models and they still ran things that showed profit, but it was still basically somewhat based in handicapping. You know, the new heavy duty ones to me are just going after the pools and how it's bet and shifted. They've even announced it. The guy who represents them in all the negotiations said the players are the smart people. We need the players to figure out what we're going to do. You know, I mean, the guy said it in an interview. So it's not, you know, I'm not saying anything out of school, but, you know, that makes it hard because that changes the whole environment, you know, and especially for somebody like me that's been doing it for so long. And I'm sure there's a lot of people listening that are in the same boat, you know. So, you know, and I you know, I'm going off on a tangent on this a little bit, but, you know, one of the things that the CRWs always talk about is they talk about what they call a dividend projection model, which basically what that means is as probably everybody knows, that's just what everything's going to pay, right? And they've said if they don't have a dividend projection model, it can't work, right? And I find great irony in that because now I don't have a good dividend projection model. What I used to think would pay 40 is now paying 20. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like figures that people are having a harder time betting because the whole track, the everyday horse players dividend projection model is fucked up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a whole brave new world. And it sounds like,
exactly.
you know, you see it in the exacta pools and NYRA, supposedly the CAW or CRW, as however you want to call them, they aren't in the win pools, supposedly. At least they don't get the same access to those pools that they do exactas. So
yeah, I believe them. So no, I believe them. There's definitely it's a different pool.
Have you been able to benefit from that at all? Have you used that in any way to your advantage? You know, comparing the exacta to the win?
I've tried, and you know, again, it's a little bit hard for me because I'm so set in my ways, and I have some of these bets that I do. But I even before the meet, I said I was going to do a lot of win parlays, where what we were talking about before with, I think in New York you could probably get away with doing some win parlays because that way you're not forced into playing those races you don't want to, you know, and you're getting somewhat value on both bets, even though you got a double takeout situation. Your value is still probably there, and I'm gravitating in that direction slowly. I'm trying to get there, but I think that's clearly a way to play more, especially in the NYRA tracks. And I think probably with the backlash that the CRWs are getting with these odd drops, I think that's going to be the long-term solution to the way the industry handles it, because they just don't want to hear about these odd drops anymore, you know, and that kind of solves that problem. It, you know, it doesn't solve
getting them out of the win
the
pool,
$11.
Is that what you mean?
Yeah, because then, so the exacta today in the last race might have dropped, but nobody sees that. You know, they see the $11 exacta, but nobody sees what actually happened there. But when the win odds at Del Mar dropped from 7-1 to 3-1, or the one the other day that was what was it, 7-2 to 9-5 after the race was over. I mean, that's just terrible dynamic. And even the racetracks know that we can't keep doing that. You know, if some guy thinks at the 16th pole he's getting $9 and you give him $5 or $5.60, you're you know, that's not going to happen forever. People aren't going to keep doing that. They know that that's a bad optic. So my guess is the first solution for these CRWs is going to be the way that NYRA is doing it, to try to cut out these odds drops. But I think we're seeing with these exactas at Saratoga right now, you know, that's kind of like the next wave problem that they're going to have, because I had a guy that I hadn't seen in 20 years today told me I am not playing an exacta in New York again. That's what he told me. He hit a couple. He didn't think he got what he deserved, and he said, I'm not playing another one.
Well, don't you see the same problem in the double pools as you do in the exacta pools?
Yeah, somewhat, but it seems to be a little less. Like I said, the further you go in the horizontal, it seems to go away just a little bit. You could probably figure that out, Chris. Why you might see that's why it's happening. But
well, I would think beyond the doubles, I think it would because of the opaqueness of the odds, right? They don't have
right.
They can project it. They can get their dividend projection model based on the doubles and the win prices, but they are guessing, and so that's a level
right.
a higher variance estimate. So I would think pick threes and pick fours, but they have visibility into double pools, so I would think they would be just as efficient playing doubles as they are in exactas.
Well, they really haven't been. And I've actually tracked doubles more this year because I'm playing them more, and I see a lot of times when you especially at Saratoga, you watch these doubles and they're all over the place. Like especially like in the 2-year-old races, the 2-year-old race today, the 1 and the 4 were taking money early in the double, and then the 6, but it was nothing that happened in the doubles throughout the whole betting really was indicative of what the real odds were. And then the real odds come up and they're kind of screwy because the CRWs aren't in it. So especially in that kind of scenario, you kind of see like this wild, it's like chaotic almost, because I think it's probably the players reacting. I would think the players are instinctively fuck these exactas. I'm betting doubles now, or if I got an opinion, I'm gonna play it in the double. I'm gonna get ahead of the CRWs. I'm gonna play this double. And I think one of the ways to beat the CRWs is what you were talking about. And I think some big players I know are doing this. They're just burying stuff. Like they're just over betting the pool so that the CRW people don't counter it. They might correct the next pool like you were talking about, but they'll abandon that pool because the bets are kind of like, I'm sure that the models are getting confused on some of it, that they might have never saw how this is being bet like this, and it kind of is like the only way to kind of mess them up in a way. And I've seen that in the double.
Or you can use them in your favor, right? Where if you play early, then they'll try to correct it, so they'll boost your price up. That I would think that could happen. If you.
Unfortunately, what you're saying in the traditional CRWs, what I was talking about before, and how all these CRWs are different. One of the problems I never had with CRWs, even though they're talking about them now and they're bigger in the last few years, but with the older ones, I didn't have a problem with them as much because they would fall for that. The handicapping CRW models would always do that. So you could spot it. Just what you're saying. You could see what was going to happen ahead of time. Like there was a double in the earlier in the meet with 2 first-time starters. The one horse paid $9 in the first leg. He was the third favorite. The second leg was 11-horse race, and it was a shipper, and nobody knew anything about the horse. The only thing about it was IRAD was riding it, but it was still not a horse that was going to be 2 to 5 with a first-time starter with 10 horses. And the double paid $7 for $1. Now in the old days, when they would bet that double, and the guys would bury that double, the CRW, the old traditional handicap models would correct that double. You know what I mean? But now they're so good and they follow the money. This is what leads me to believe that they're following money instead of handicapping. They don't touch it. If anything, they're playing it. They're playing that double. And there's no model in the world that could tell you that that's $7. I don't care what. There's no possible way that I've done a little modeling, and I know some of this stuff that they do, the modern day stuff, and they run these queries. You cannot machine learn any way, form to make that double be $7 on your model, but they don't correct it. You know what I mean? That's where these are the things that horse players are noticing that are really screwed up.
So, we talked about how as you get into like the horizontal plays, pick threes and beyond, it seems like that's a place where the computers, they're handicapping. You can out handicap them, and if you're smart about the way you bet, maybe that's one way to be successful in today's game. What about deeper in the verticals? You haven't really mentioned tries or supers much. You kind of talk about exactas. Do you go into the more exotic vertical wagers and or is that something?
One thing that I've definitely found out is that this is probably more straight math and stuff that you could probably figure out. But if you're playing a favorite, and it used to be where you could get some maybe value if you had a horse run third that was long, or a bust out horse, or a bust out horse ran fourth, and the models nowadays they really don't fall for that. They've almost kind of like the bust out stuff in the tries. We're talking about before 2 levels. You need, in order to bust them out, you need something to happen, opinion that's going to win, that's a little outside the box, as your key. And then if you get the bust out horse with your key, you'll get paid. If you can get to that point in a race where you can try to manage that, I think that's one of the things I'm trying to do more. It's a tough way to bet. You're going to lose more. You're going to lose more races, but I got to find a way to hedge use that kind of bet to make the score, but make a way so that maybe playing the doubles or something kind of, or even maybe a win bet in New York, you could bet more to win than you normally do, or even place. You could even make a win place pool, which somebody would say no way, but in New York I consider it because the models aren't supposed to be in the place pool, and I don't think they are, and some kind of bet like that, and I think you could probably tiptoe your way through the whole thing. But the ways that winning horse players have won in the past are kind of going with the win right now. That betting mentality is changing. It's already changed. You can do what the guy told me today. He's not betting exactas anymore. You can do that, or you got to kind of do what I was just saying. You got to kind of tiptoe your way through so that you can get that bust out. And if you get the bust out and you can, these on these CRWs, you can really get paid. If you can get there.
So the bust out, I want to try to make sure I understand the scenario we're talking about. So I think what you mean is you've got to have a creative opinion on top, something not obvious from a handicapping perspective, and you want to beat the favorite. And if you can do those two things, whether it's an exacta or you can get the favorite out of the try or the super, then you still can get decent value out of the pool. But you kind of need
not always.
both those.
Not always. That's what's hard about these CRWs. Just beating the favorite alone, I've seen it. You get the second and third
creative
choices.
Opinion on top, though. I mean, like you've got.
You still won't get paid. You still not. You might get what you're supposed to, but I've seen it where you don't even get the value on that. You need the tricky one, to go with it. I mean, that's what makes it so hard. I mean, you can't just say, all right, I'm against this favorite and I like this 10-1 shot, and I'm going to play him with the second, third, and fourth favorites, which is classic bet forever. That's a classic bet forever. That's a winning bet forever. For anybody that can handicap worth a damn, that is a winning bet, and you're going to be a winning horse player. When I say winning horse player, you may not be able to do it for a living, but you're going to win in over long terms of playing, and you're going to be able to play and not go broke, and you're going to have this hobby that you can play for your life. And you know what? Nowadays, that's not a winning play necessarily. It might be, but it's not necessarily. I mean, they will come short. They'll come short on you in those plays, which I've seen. There was two of them earlier in the meet where the horse was 45 to 1 in the one race, and the two favorites ran. The second and third favorite ran somehow behind him, and it didn't pay anything. And then I saw another one where the favorite was third, but then a bust-out horse was, or maybe it was the favorite ran second, and the bust-out horse was third, and that one paid. So that try paid, but the other one didn't. And it's back to that. How am I supposed to bet if I don't know what's going to pay and what's not? And that's what kind of the CRW is doing. And maybe we'll learn, maybe it's just a learning process, but it's hard for people that have gone to the races for 5 years, 10 years, 50 years. This is what it's supposed to pay, and then it doesn't.
Okay, so in terms of the pick five, or besides, beyond the double, do you play pick threes, pick fours, and pick fives, or do you focus on the pick five, or it just depends on the opinion of the race? I mean, how do you decide which horizontal bets you're going to play in?
Kind of which what fits what I think for the, like the handicapping thing. If there's too many, like you hit the nail on the head earlier. Like if there's too many races where I don't know what to do with, I might not play a pick five, but I'll play the pick four, in that scenario because I'll eliminate one of them. If I know that I'm going to eliminate two of them somehow and I can play the pick three, or I can play a double. I prefer to do that if it gets too confused. I think the more you can get yourself to play the all the way to the five, the better off you are. Which is tough because the pick five on your bankroll can be a pain, and that's I think that's we touched on it a little bit. The tough thing about betting in this, betting pick fives, you're gonna lose, and you're not gonna hit every single one of them. You could be playing perfectly and not hit one for a year.
So how big of a percentage of your play would you say is a pick five or pick six? Because I know you used to really be a pick six player at one time back in the traditional pick six days.
It like I said, it's in transition. It just keeps going up. My pick bets are going up and up and up, and my exactas and tries were going down. And it always used to be that the try was my biggest bet. And I notice when I look at it now, it's not. The doubles and pick fives have passed it because I've gravitated in that direction. But
let's talk about go ahead.
The pick six versus the pick five is a different animal, because when you played the pick six, it was like, at least for me, we kept it independent of what I was doing and betting in the rest of the day. And when you played a pick six, it was pretty clear cut what you were trying to do. You were trying to get the pool, and if not, you were trying to get it. You didn't have to worry about hitting it 6 times most of the time in a pick six, and what you were trying to do in a pick six, you could pretty much map into an amount that you should bet. Like if I'm going to bet a little bit of money to where I think I can get the whole pool, it would be better to bet 2,500 than it would be to bet 600, because you'd spread more, because if I got the right ideas, I got more of a chance to hit those things that are going to pay a lot. And if not, you want to play smaller. Again, a 200 bet might be better than the 600 bet, and I always thought that if and I could even probably mathematically prove it, you're better off by staying under 256 and higher than 1248. You know what I mean? Like, stay out of that middle ground, where they get you nothing, because you could add horses and not really gain anything. The pick five is completely different, because you have to worry about hitting it more than once if you're playing a lot of money. if you're going to go and spread, you gotta worry about how you want to hit it multiple times, and that becomes a different thing. And the pick 5 is not independent of your other day a lot of times, because because the way we're forced to bet. I got to make this like my opinion, part of my opinion, which I never did that in a pick 6 ever. So, there's a lot of different things there that happen. Everybody tells you not to spread in a pick 5, but I'm going to tell you, most of the people that hit pick 5s for a lot of money spread. Whether they're winning in the long run, that's a different question. But the tickets that come back, the ones you want to hit, the ones that pay 30,000 or 40,000, a lot of, if you saw the winning ticket, you'd say, oh, that's a fucking, the term that everybody uses, that's a caveman ticket. You know what I mean? And I know the people that are hitting them, and they look like caveman tickets, let me tell you, but yet that could be a losing bet, if you're not doing it correctly, and I also find that part wheels stink for pick 5s, especially the way I play them. I'm trying to play them in levels and tiers, and back to the mentality. Do I care if this one wins? If this one wins, do I want it for three times? Do I want this one for 2 times? You got to go through all that, which is really hard to do with a part wheels. So at a high level, playing pick 5s, I think is difficult, more so because of the technology that we have, than what your opinions are, or the fact that, back again what I said earlier, I think you can out handicap the CRWs on a pretty standard basis in that pool, but their edge is they're going to play the right amounts on everything.
Right. They can play each individual combination. Right.
Yeah.
They could put in thousands of bets that you're just not going to do as a person. Each one can be weighted differently.
That's my challenge to the tote system in ADW is that can be changed. I mean, there's no reason why we're in 2023 we're stuck with part wheels. We shouldn't be stuck with designated favorites. We shouldn't be stuck with part wheels. The technology's there. These guys are doing this crazy stuff with software and machine learning, but our tote system can't somehow create a payoff based on if a horse is scratched at the gate. I mean, that's crazy. That's nuts. We're stuck to a part wheel. We can't just have some kind of system where you put in what you like on some kind of grid, and the file upload puts you on a thing where you can then send the bet off. These guys are betting 1,000 bets a second, they're approved for, but we can't get a thing that pops up on the screen so that we can see, our 36 combinations and how much we want to play for each one of them, and then hit the send button and have it go off. I mean, that's not right. I mean, that's wrong. That's the tote company not doing their job. That's not keeping up with the tote company. Should be keeping up with these CRW guys so that the everyday player can keep up with them. It's not my job, or it's not your job, Chris, to go out and write a program, write the code to do a file upload for this, for these pick 5s. It shouldn't be our job to do that.
So, given that constraints that you're working within on the pick 5, kind of what is your approach? I mean, how do you structure your tickets when you play the pick 5?
Well, it's a work in progress. But again, I'm doing a lot of what ifs. I don't play one ticket. I'll never just play one ticket, but I play a lot of series of tickets that cover me of what I, what my opinions are. I like simple scenarios where I want if horse A wins the second race, or if horse B wins the fourth race, I'm going to be mad if I don't hit it. So I got to think about every scenario that's going to play out. If especially if I'm singling, a 10-to-1 shot in the second race and a 10, or in a 5-to-1 in the fourth leg. I beat the right horses in those legs. I want to hit it. So I may spread more in a scenario. I may use an all in a scenario in that group where if I'm right in the 4 legs and I'm wrong in one, I still want to hit it if it pays 20,000. You know, I don't want to be if my 10-1 and my 5-1 wins and I blow some other leg because I thought the favorite should be 3-1 instead of 2-1. No, I'm not doing that. That's stupid. I don't care what anybody says. That's a dumb move. You know, you gotta. There's still. I mean, if you wanted to look at the ROI on that single bet, back to what we were talking about, there's tons of value in that bet. You know, you don't have to throw it out just in each leg. You know, and I think, and this is not against anybody that says anybody that you should throw out the favorite if you don't like them in every leg. I get it. It's a good guide. It's back to what we were talking about. It's a guide. And if you're not betting a lot of money and you are betting a little to win a lot and you're really speculating, okay, you know, I mean, you don't want to have that. You don't want your tickets cost to be too much on you, you know. So I can see the argument that it's a good guide, but you have to think about how it's going to play out and if you're going to be mad. I'll give you an example. My youngest son played a pick 5 the other day. And it was in one race. He kept throwing horses in. He didn't like it. He had 6 horses out of 9 in the one leg. He played flawless in the other 4 picks. He made great handicapping, great ticket structure, nailed the other 4, lost the leg with the 6 out of 9. And it paid $8,000 or $9,000, and he played like a $48 ticket, I mean, it was ridiculous. When I looked at his ticket, I said, "Oh my God!" I think he made it 96, and I split it with him, and I just felt really bad for him because the 3 horses is less than doubling the other ticket. You know, the 3 more on the end, and he had it in his head. I don't want to use all. I don't want to use all. He was kind of using the right guidelines, but in retrospect, it was dumb. You know, his ticket was terrible that he could force himself to lose when he's right in the other 4 legs. You know, and again, the nature of a pick 5 is very difficult. I'm not saying this is easy. I mean, believe me, you know, everybody listening to this knows it's very hard. But when you're forced to play them, these scenarios can play out, and it's you know, don't get pigeonholed in I can't do this or I can't do that.
But it sounds like you're playing multiple tickets and you're making sure every ticket you've built some equity in several other legs. There might be 1 or 2 races where you don't have much of an opinion, but you think, you know, you could make a score and you're going to be more conservative on those and maybe spread just because you know you've got built up a lot of equity in these other 3 legs.
And the other leg.
Maybe these two legs are, I'm going to spread, but you're not spreading in every leg just because you want to make sure you catch every race. That's a prescription for disaster, right?
Right, exactly. Right. Again, it's the 2 tiers. You know, it's the tiered value. You know, it's right back to that. You know, if you've said it perfectly. If you got the built-in value in 3 of the tiers, why are you worried about the value in the 4th tier? You know, and then the scenario might change on a different ticket, you know, where the scenario might not be where if you know, if this comes in the first 3 legs, maybe that ticket, I got to change the way I look at the last 2 legs.
Yeah. So like say there's three value horses you like. If they all come in, you don't want to get too cute in the other 2 legs. But if you only hit one, maybe you catch one of them, you'd still like to hit, but you got to be tight in those last 2. And, you know, if you're
right, I got to be, exactly. Exactly.
Or you just don't play that, right? Because
right,
you're just,
exactly. Yeah, 100%. You 100%.
Because you want to sort of balance that, you know, risk and reward. And like you said, if you just focus on ROI and you have really efficient tickets, your long-term ROI could be good, but it might be like hitting the Powerball when it's a positive EV bet, right?
Right.
You might not live
Yeah.
long enough to ever cash in on that positive bet.
Especially for probably most people that are listening to this, especially if you're attacking the pick 5 and like my sons do with smaller bankrolls, there's it definitely that comes into play more, without a doubt.
Well, it's really hard to have the right opinion on 5 consecutive races that you don't get to pick on your own. I mean, that's just really hard to do, to be, exactly right on all 5 legs. So if you actually want to cash with some frequency, you probably should pass a lot of them, for one thing. You probably shouldn't be playing every pick 5. I feel like you have to play them all. But the ones you do play, you got to make sure that, you've got some opinions where you think you can build equity, and then maybe if there's a race or two where you don't have a strong opinion, that's where you need to maybe be a little more forgiving in terms of, spreading out. And like you said, in some cases, maybe even the all button might come into play.
Yep, no doubt. Especially in the case with my son, where he had the built-in value already. What's he worried about? What's he worried about the 3 horses there? The 3 other horses that, he said after the fact he didn't like the horse. I said, well, A, you didn't have a strong opinion in the race. You used 6 of them. So you obviously were confused. So, why you're torturing yourself? It's like to watch that win is a torture.
Yeah, that's a great example of how the math is so extreme in like the pick 5. Like if you can cut 2 horses down to 1, there's tremendous leverage in the pick 5 because you cut your ticket price in half. But if you've got 7 horses on your ticket in a 9-horse field, it doesn't cost you a whole lot to add another horse or 2, right? The math works in your favor.
I always used to think about that with the anytime I went over the half mark on a leg, I started. It was like almost like alarm went off. This is danger. I always think about that. It's like built into me, where it wouldn't be built into my 18-year-old son. But but for me, that kind of always like says, all right, I got to do a better job of handicapping in this race, or I gotta consider the all. I gotta do something. I'm in no man's land here.
Or pass. If you got several races like that, then just get out of that. Don't try to play.
I find, Chris, that what happens is if you get to that point in a leg, you've probably got some kind of opinion somewhere else. You know what I mean? Like
if you haven't given up by now, it's because you really want to play this pick 5.
Yeah, right. That's the right way to say it.
So do you still now that we're getting more of the traditional pick 6s like they have in New York, do you get involved in the pick 6? Is that a big part of your play, or you focus more on the pick 5, or I'm just curious.
Well, I'm getting back into them. I mean, I like the way it's going. Because of all the jackpot stuff, it was pretty much I'd retired the pick 6, kind of in my mind, and I've noticed how much they're handling at Saratoga, and I'm just starting to get back into them.
And you said you do have a little different mindset. The pick 6 is more like you're just trying to hit it versus, maybe hit it multiple times in the pick 5. Did I understand you right in that?
Without a doubt, I think the value in a pick 6 is if you actually figured out the probability is, that was always the thing about the pick 6 that was great is that, all right, well, the probability of hitting this may be, 5,000 to win, 5,000 to 1, but it's going to pay 100,000 if I hit it. You know what I mean? But in order to get to that point, the costs go up. The dollar makes it a little bit tighter where you don't get those quite scenarios. But that's kind of way, before the CRWs and they had these big payoff bets like the dollar supers and the $2 pick 6s and maybe even some other things that they had before. When you get up to that level, you you're dealing with high-end probability that's in your favor, you know, and you got to try to build to get there. It's building value to get there, like we were talking about before. But it's to me in racing, it was at the ultimate level, you know, the pick six or the superfecta or the super high five for $1, you know, in the derby or something. You know, you're building into some high probability shit, you know, and you know, and that was fun. For the most part, it all got wiped out, you know. And then if you understand that what the CRWs do is kind of in the same boat. I mean, if you read the Thorpe stuff, he's the blackjack guy, but he's basically the founder of this idea especially of the handicapping CRWs. And the idea is the ridiculously high probable things that have a chance to come in and these pools are not worth it. So throw them out and bet everything else. That was like his theory, you know, like his theory started with a double, like in the 50s, you know, throw the ones the doubles that are going to pay 500 because the real probability is 20,000 to 1. So throw them out and then play all the other ones, get a model that's close to winning, and then maybe hedge if you have to, but even, you know, he's got some kind of built-in hedge where he catches something for part of the time on some of these other ones. And that was his concept of the whole thing. And it's still the basis of the CRW. So it gets back to what we were talking about before. You know, they're not going to have those type of plays. So you got to find, this is very difficult. This is what's making it so hard nowadays. You got to find those high probability things where they're wrong on, you know, like this has got a better chance that, you know, like we were talking about before, this try's got a better chance. They're throwing it out because they think it's infinity, the probability, but your handicapping says no, you know. And then the problem with that is if you're playing that kind of game, it's back to the Powerball thing. Where's the opportunity? You know, I mean, there's less and less opportunity. You might be playing it right. You can lose forever. You know, it's not the same game that people like to play and loved, you know. And it's like, you know, and that's what people tell me. And that's the sad part to me. That's the sad part about the CRWs that, you know, all right, you can still beat it. You know, you can counter it, but in order to counter it, you got to do some of this stuff that is not necessarily even fun. You know, it's hard, but it's not necessarily even fun. And that's but you know, it's like we said, it's not unbeatable. It's not, you can't still have scores. That's kind of why I think the pick five thing works. You know, that's why people gravitate toward it, because I think people can see the pick five high probability stuff better. And it's a better chance. I have a friend who hit a pick five for 200,000, 250,000 one day. He's not going to bet 250,000 in 30 years. And, you know, he's going to die before he loses the thing. Those are the opportunities you have. It's so much different than when my grandfathers were playing where, you know, there was inherent value in a 2-to-1 shot, or there was
there were no exotics. I mean, basically you had the double,
right.
and maybe one race with an exacta in it or something. I remember, right. I'm old enough to remember those days. You know, there was maybe one trifecta bet when that came out, and you only had one card you could play, right? You had 9 races. That was it.
Right.
So
no doubt. And
world.
Yeah, no doubt. It's a different world, and I think you know, there's guys that are definitely, you know, I don't know exactly if they're doing the right thing. They could be getting lucky, but I do know, I don't think people should despair that it's unbeatable. It's just, it's really different, and it could be less fun for you, you know. So like I think when Brent says that he's quitting, he's not quitting because he thinks he's you know, like he's overmatched or anything. I just think he says, this ain't fun. You know, I thought I played something that, you know, for probably the last 20 or 30 things that he hit, he probably thought he should have gotten more. he worked real hard, and he says, you know what? I'm not having fun. I'd rather bet football. You know, to me, sports betting to me, I think is something I could do, and I think I could be okay with it. But to me, I never had fun. I've had stretches where I've won betting sports, and it's helped me sometimes in my life. But even when I was doing that, it was more of a job. Horse racing has always been fun for me. Like back to what we were talking about when I first started. The thing that I always thought, even though people were taking serious things about money and there was math and it was a serious thing, the people that went to the races with me had fun, and obviously it's more fun when you win, but even so, it just, when you take the fun away, when you tell somebody they're going to get $9 and they're only going to get $5.60 after the wire, you're taking the fun away, and that's what's that's the bad part about racing right now. And somehow they got to fix it. They got to fix it somehow, or we're going to have a problem.
Yeah, well, I think we're already having a problem if you look at handle numbers.
Yeah, we already have a problem.
I mean, it's here, and I think it's been hidden because of the CRWs and because the tracks have catered to them because it's pumped their handle up. But I think it's really hidden the fact that, and plus, inflation in the last couple of years has helped too. So, but I mean, it's just buried. It's not as obvious as it should be, and I think it's just now starting to come to light that, if you take the computers out there, it's pretty ugly. And, they like the computer, like you said, and the computer team's got to have other players in the pool, or it's just going to be them betting against each other, and that's not going to work for anybody.
No, you're 100% right. I couldn't agree with you more. You said it absolutely perfect. Yeah, I agree 100%. As they say, I don't know if they still say it, but facts. That's what I should have said to you.
But so, okay, you did mention something a while back that I wanted to come back to. You said the game's really changing. Two things are really driving that. We're kind of in this transition period. The CRWs have kind of, I'll call it, they've sort of hit critical mass. Up until this point, we weren't going to see the bomb explode, but right now, it's critical mass, and there could be a major nuclear accident, if it doesn't get contained. We're kind of there. We're at that kind of tipping point, I think, or close to it. But you also mentioned the HISA stuff, and how do you see that affecting horse players, and how's that affected you, if at all? Now that it's a year in, not up fully a year in terms of some of the things they're doing with the testing and things, but where do you see that fitting in?
I think that's more handicapping, based, where form, just basic form, to me has changed because of, it's not only the HISA thing. I mean, my big pet peeve, nobody mentions it, they just hide it, but the Lasix and no Lasix, one of my big edges was that I kind of knew when a horse was a top level horse before anybody else. And now it could be just a total disguise that a horse could, and you have no confidence that when a horse runs with Lasix, that he's going to run the same way without it, and I think what will happen as time progresses, the form will get more balanced. But I think since the day the juice died, when those other guys got caught, to the Lasix thing, to the HISA, we've had scenarios where trainers at different times have tightened their medications, whether legal or illegal. The HISA basically is what they've done is tightened the legal medication, not necessarily the legal stuff, because nobody was catching the illegal stuff anyway. So I there's bigger penalties, and I think less people will to do things, which is a good thing. But I just think we've had the scenario where people say, "Oh, I can't get caught. I can't do these other things," and even just the the injections of the horses that, I mean, for 25 years now, maybe, we've had these scenarios where the guys would inject horses days out before the race, 5 days out before the races. And it was a standard thing. And you could probably count on that the horses were going to show up. And now all of a sudden they got to do it so far out. They're not going to treat the horse now. They're going to do things differently. They're going to use different methods. And I think the form has gone haywire in the last 3 years because of that, the overall form. I mean, we got some other built-in problems with handicapping that we didn't touch into, because we're not really, your podcast is really not a handicapping thing, but, these long layoffs between the races is another, that's another problem for handicapping. We could talk about that forever, because, when a horse is not running for, a bunch of horses aren't running from now to the Breeders' Cup. So you're talking about horses that aren't going to run for 3 months, and then you're going to decide if horse A can beat horse B based on what they did at Saratoga, and expect that they're going to run the same exact, they're going to run within a fraction of a second, when you haven't seen them for 3 months. Obviously, the people that are closer to the horse, the trainers, the owners, the clockers, the people that hang on to those people, they've got a better idea than you, if you're sitting watching a replay from August, than what was really happening right now. So, I mean, that's another problem altogether, but it's a big one. And, that's handicapping to me, though. That falls into a handicapping bucket. If watching workouts is what you need to do to handicap and that sort of thing, well, that's more power to you, and you're a better handicapper than me. But, at this point in my life, I don't really want to go out in the morning and clock workouts. You know what I mean? I'm going to try to do it.
You don't want to get up at 4 a.m. in the freezing cold?
No, not really. But I understand anybody who wants to. I think it's, it's definitely in this environment, especially at the higher levels, it's a huge edge if you, and if that part is fun to you, then and it's worth it to you, God bless you. But it definitely affects form. The form has definitely been affected in the last 3 to 10 years, and a different way, in different waves too. It's not like, all right, it changed from, overnight and everybody got affected. It's every barn's been different. Everything's done completely different. If the different vets do different things, and if you're with this vet and this vet, I mean, it's really changed the form. But probably over time that will correct itself. I think as HISA progresses, it'll at least correct itself enough that you'll come up with new things.
Yeah, it may be different, but it'll be more predictable, I think is what you're saying. Right now, it's just really unpredictable because everyone's figuring out what to do with the new, the new set of rules.
Right. Right, and they're trying new things. I mean, like the perfect example is Bill Mott when they first went to no Lasix. He had the worst fit. He had the worst numbers, on my stuff for dropping figures and even I think even win percentages weren't very good, but don't hold me to that. But I know that I thought it was negative, and now whatever protocol he's using when the horses aren't on Lasix, it's better. I mean, he's the best. He's gone from so these things these angles that you had maybe at the beginning, totally flip flopped on you, and within a few months. And I mean those are things that how can you predict that? If you're on your toes, maybe you pick up on it a little bit when it happens, but I don't know. That's pretty hard, and that's different, and that kind of stuff will disappear, I think, as time goes.
So I know you looked at the Lasix stuff pretty closely. Is there any kind of general things that you've seen, or is it trainer specific? I mean, is anything else, in terms of the Lasix on, Lasix off, that you've seen that there are some patterns or predictability to it?
No, I think it's I know we're going probably down a different road that we probably shouldn't, but I don't find it really predictable. I think it's a case by case basis, and I think the nature of bleeding is it's not like a switch. I've noticed a lot of horses that will have no problem with the Lasix, run without the Lasix and might run okay, and then go back with Lasix and run bad, and obviously bleed, because whatever happened when they went with no Lasix probably led to them bleeding even with the Lasix. So when you have those scenarios, and and the trainers changing how they handle it, I just found it to be, the only thing that I do know is they run. There's a lot of slow times that, and if you're paying attention to figures like with your own system with the color coding, there's a lot of slow figures that are being projected up when there is no Lasix. And I found that it's not really indicative of what's going to happen in the future, which is weird. It's
So you're saying maybe they're
you
being over projected, so they're giving them faster figures than they really should.
Yeah, I think that a lot of the high end races are being projected up to keep up with the no Lasix, because of it's a complicated thing, but I think there's a lot more projecting going on. So, I mean, I think that the horses that we have now, and I don't think anybody would argue with me this, the horses that are running now are, if you wanted to compare them to the horses 5 years ago that were running with Lasix, they're way worse, in general, at every stakes level, that they're running slower, that to win a stake now is technically you're running slower, but you have to do it without Lasix and within the HISA rules. It makes sense. It's logical. It's not nothing all that profound about that, but it's the truth. And to pretend that it's not is wrong. I mean, how you go about it, that's that's up to you, and that's the hard thing. But for me, that was kind of my bread and butter, especially with the good horses, and you could really get those horses where that had a lot of value. And now there is no value because you got to put into the equation that they could bleed and and not run at all. You know what I mean?
No, that's interesting. And that's a value of someone like you that has been doing the numbers over that period of time. You kind of know what to expect at these different levels, and you can look back over time and see that trend.
Yep, no doubt.
All right, so let me ask you some specific kinds of questions I like to cover. Some of these might go really quick.
Yeah, let's. I think it'd be a good idea. I can't believe anybody's still listening.
No, you'll be surprised. This is good stuff. This is great. So, but I don't want to tire you out too much.
No, ask away. But
all right,
I don't want to torture anybody out there.
They can always skip forward or turn it off. This is all This is on demand podcast. So, let's see. All right, foreign racing. I mean, I know you've spoken with some insight on some of these foreign runners when they come over for the Breeders' Cup. Is that just homework you're doing for the Breeders' Cup, or do you play the foreign races on a regular basis?
I've bet Hong Kong on and off for 22 years, something like that. 2001, maybe 2001. So I know a lot about Hong Kong, and some of these other foreign tracks I don't know. Just some of the stuff that the shippers into Hong Kong really lead you to know some more stuff about other countries. So I got to be more in tune with Australian racing and Japan racing. The European stuff, I haven't done much more than the Breeders' Cup stuff. And I would love, in like a horse racing utopia, I believe that the Dubai meet would be like a World Cup meet, and somebody like the Mohammeds could pull that off, and maybe in some kind of world when you and I are gone. But that seems to be like the horse racing center point, which could be really interesting if they ran a winter meet there from all the tracks around the world, and with a whirlpool that Hong Kong has. I think that would be fucking awesome. That if racing could ever come together on a world stage like that, and it could be done in Dubai. It really could be done in that area. I know it's, you get into politicals when you're dealing with countries and stuff, but in a horse racing sense, it could be amazing, because I think the whole world could easily get there, and they've been so forthcoming trying to get the people to go there at different times of the year. That would be pretty amazing if they could ever pull that off somehow.
Yeah, I agree. On the Hong Kong racing, is that a lot different than playing the U.S. racing? Is it, what are the biggest differences? Do you think it's easier or harder to, get an edge in Hong Kong? I'm just curious.
Well, it's 14 horse turf sprints for the most part. So you got to picture that, which is hard for. It's getting easier, but these guys running these turf sprints here, because most of the races are between 6 furlongs and a mile, and they're the hardest part is to be in Hong Kong is certain scenarios don't play out like it's a class system, so the trainer intent is way different here, where a guy is trying to the whole year he's trying to find a level where the horse can win. He's got a race mapped out in April where he's going to get his rating down to, and he's going to use 6 races to do it. And if he wins one of them, fine. But if he doesn't, I'm going to hit that. This is my target. And to me, that was very difficult for me. It still is when I do watch it, but I understand it more because of that. The way they ride and the fact that it's 14 horses on the turf, obviously, it's got a kind of short run to the turn. So ground loss in the turn, and then when they run at Happy Valley, it's even worse when it's 2 turns. It just nature of turf racing, things, nothing earth shattering, but it's race after race after race where 5 jockeys will decide they're gonna go back to last because they are not going to risk going outside. So pace scenarios are way different because it's the intent of how they're going to ride. So I love the dirt racing in Hong Kong, but they don't run a lot of it. And if they ran a lot of it, I probably would just bet Hong Kong dirt racing, and I would probably scrap the American racing completely. But they don't, it's here, it's 1 race a day, 2 races a week at the most, on most weeks. So it's kind of tough to do that.
But you've been at least sticking with it for a while, 20 some odd years.
Yeah, I had a lot of success when I first started. I hit a pick 6. I've had some of my worst beats in my life were in Hong Kong. They have a triple trio where you have to pick 3 triple boxes in a row, and 2 times I've had the first 2 and then finished 1st, 2nd, and 4th, and lost a photo for 3rd for more than $1 million US. So so that's the one thing about Hong Kong. The opportunities, that you can make in Hong Kong are unbelievable, on certain scenarios. I once bet a horse in Hong Kong. I bet there was a horse that was 250 to 1 that I bet. I get confused because I don't know if I bet it, Hong Kong money or, but it was definitely closer to the third level that I liked him. And he finished fourth in a 4-horse photo, and I had used all 3 horses, and I had bet him to win, and I had bet a lot of money on him, and it looked like he was going to win. And I've never had that opportunity. It was 250 or 260 to 1, and he took the lead. I could see him winning. He came right up on the outside of the horses, and it was just it was a devastating beat. And so, I mean, I guess that's the best thing about Hong Kong is that the options. I have a friend of mine that when the pick sixes went away, he was very depressed. He said, what got me up in the morning was the idea that I could win 40,000 today at Belmont, and the pick six could pay 40,000 today, and just the idea that I have a chance to do that, when I open the paper, and when they took that away from him, he says the opportunities really aren't there every day, and I kind of get what he's talking about. It just was like again, things are more important. There are things that are more important than money, how you feel and, having fun and having a good time and optimism, they're more important in life. And, I think that's one of the things that drew me to horse racing. Like we said earlier, those are, the things that make you feel good. I mean, I felt home, and, I think that's why people are, again, I keep saying the same thing here, but it's, when it goes away, you take that other stuff away from people. And people always ask, why do people who lose keep coming back to the races, and I think it's, it's that nature, I mean, that enjoyment, that stuff. And, as long as we didn't get into them, but as long as you don't go into some of the pitfalls of gambling, it doesn't matter if you win, if it makes your life better. And I think that's what people are noticing about modern day horse racing is that, those feelings are going away. And that's the sad part to me.
Yeah, I mean, most horse players really are passionate. They really love it. Yeah, I know what you mean. And if that passion goes away, then why are they going to play? I absolutely
Right.
get that. So a couple other questions. Fixed odds wagering. Have you gotten into that at all? Is that a part of your game?
No, I've been wanting to do it at Monmouth, and I just haven't had the right opportunity to do it. But I someday that's possible. I mean, we were talking about before. That's solution B, probably that the industry would have to these odd drops, is to give people fixed odds. That seems to be the other scenario, and I could see it happening. But there's definitely some opportunity there, and anybody who's taking advantage of it, I get it. I don't know what would happen if you started winning. I kind of have that. I kind of went through that in my life. When the offshore stuff was kind of not illegal yet, and I had scenarios where I was going pretty good guns, and I got soured on that because you'd lose, and then you'd start winning, and then all of a sudden it would be off. Then they saw that you could beat them, and then that would be it. And I worry that that's what would happen with the fixed odds too. But I don't know if that's what would happen. Who knows? I know they got it's a pretty high takeout spread that the Monmouth uses. I've seen opportunities. What I do notice about the Monmouth, if anybody can play it that's listening, I think the better opportunities are with short horses, which is probably a little counterintuitive for most handicappers. But they don't want to get beat on the high end, but they don't care if they get beat on a, they'll give you 8-5 or 9-5 on a horse that should be even money, or a horse that will go off even money at the end, which doesn't seem like a lot, but if you're nabbing those day after day, it all comes down to value. There's value there. You could probably do good in that environment, but I don't think you're ever going to go there with the idea of, well, I'm going to beat them with long shots.
So that sounds like their price makers are the opposite of Thorpe. They don't want to get beat by those impossible.
Well, I think they can really get killed. They can really get killed on those,
Yeah. Okay, so carryovers. We haven't talked much about that. Now there are more carryovers now, are the traditional kind, or the jackpot carryovers. I mean, is that something that you're following and you're trying to attack carryovers whenever you see those?
Well, I mean, that was the nature, the two things that would beat, again, this is the changing world. The two things that always, for all horse players, that you could beat is that, the rebates was a world where it was essentially a lower takeout. That's it was a lower takeout for an everyday player. That's kind of what rebates were. That's why I'm very pro rebates, because the idea that they're going to lower takeout to 5% is not realistic. There's too many hands in the till. It's never going to. It's a regulation. It's a government thing where you can't. It's just not going to happen. So, this kind of is a way to counter that. And carryovers. I mean, that's the other way to counter the takeout. So, why wouldn't you want to play a carryover where the essential takeout is nothing or positive? I want to play in that kind of pool all the time. Unfortunately, I don't like some of the things that happen with the jackpot, and also if the jackpot's 20 cents, it's a huge edge for the CRWs, again, because we don't have the right technology. If the technology was better, I would be more inclined to play those, but I didn't play the giveaway at Gulfstream. I didn't have any interest at all, which is really weird. That, like in the mindset that they're going to have a payout, and I just wouldn't even consider playing it. But I think it's, the nature of the new world of betting.
Yeah, one thing I've noticed is, the carryovers that are random, like on traditional pick sixes, they just carry over the next day or the next race day, versus these jackpots where they plan out when they're going to do the mandatory give out. It's like the cards that they pick, the race sequence they pick are just terrible in those. They try to pick all these impossible races, again, which I think would favor the computers. That's part of what I didn't like about the mandatory, especially at Gulfstream. I mean, they would just pick just horrible set of races that I just would never, ever typically play on my own. Have you noticed that at all? Or versus, the random day, like if it carries over at Saratoga, it's going to be the next card. It's not some stacked card trying to, get as much as they can out of the mandatory payout. It's just whatever the card is the next day, right?
Well, 100%. That's why I do one thing about those mandatory payouts. Like, I seem to have done better. I like the ones that are around the big races at a place, like at a smaller track. When they announce that Century Mile is going to do it on their Derby day, or Assiniboia gave away on their big days. I find that to be a little bit better, because you kind of know that the racing is going to be more natural, probably, the races they put together.
And the quality of the card might be about as good as they can put together at that track.
Yeah, without a doubt.
So you mentioned that, that's a good lead in the next question. The big days, not necessarily Assiniboia Downs, but tracks typically have one or two big days for their meeting where they really point to and they stack the cards. We got one coming up this weekend at Saratoga, although their stakes races from a betting standpoint haven't been very good in New York for a while. But I mean, do you go after those? And it's obviously Derby, Breeders' Cup, but I mean, do you target those big days? Are they just another day? I'm just curious how you go after that.
Well, it's changed. You know, it's changed where, once upon a time, I might not even recognize, one day to the next, but because they handle so much on those bigger days, they've become bigger. They become a bigger deal. And I think the those days are harder on the. I know that there's some data out there that they did good on the Florida Derby or the Pegasus World Cup, but I think that the computer guys definitely have a harder time on the bigger days if they're welcome, if they're competitive stakes, and they're because the nature of what we're talking about, the bust out horse is a horse that could be, a really good horse, where we go race to race on these days, there's race fillers in these races that, you got two trainers that have two horses that one of them they're just running so that the race would go. They got each track seems to have a series of trainers that train at 3% just so that they can fill the races. So a 6-horse field is essentially a 4-horse field. That's different than even a 6-horse field that in a stake race where as long as it's not 3 Chad or 3 Pletcher or something, where it's competitive. So I think in general terms in this new world that it's just better racing and better chance to get, maybe a horse that, the 5th or 6th favorite or even the 8th favorite or, the 12th favorite has a chance. And I think the more that happens, the better chance you have against the CRWs.
So you're saying the deeper, more competitive races are races where you might be able to out handicap the CRWs?
Well, I just think there's more value too, like what we were talking about before. I think you can put it together.
No, all right.
Here.
So I got one last question I wanted to ask you.
Okay.
So
yeah,
because in a lot of these interviews, I've been getting some feedback where it kind of depresses players that it's getting so hard to win. But like, you're continuing on, so you must see a path to continued success as a player. So what kind of advice do you give the younger players, or even though the other players are struggling now, it's tougher than it used to be, what are the things they can do to be successful in the game today and the way it's changing?
Well, if you have the answer, tell me. I'm ready to listen. I have some strategies that I'm doing. I think that the less you bet and to speculate more, and and then I was making the mistake of, like I said earlier, I was going to try to out handicap them. So I would try on my bigger bets. I was trying to bet differently and trying to really nab things on the ones that I would consider the third tier or the bets that I really liked. And I noticed that just led to a lot of bad beats. A lot of times I would be right and not cash anything. And I think that was a mistake. I think the idea, for at least I'm trying to do, is to play more races, but speculate in those races. So, because that the computer guys are playing a lot of races and they're playing a lot to win a little. If you can handle it mentally, if you can play 2 try combinations, and I'm not saying playing the favorite over the second and third favorite. Play play what you like. Let your handicap dictate it. Don't force it. But if you can play that type of way, I think you can do good if you're if you're disciplined. But I think that's a hard way to do it. So my balance is try to play more like I used to on the races that I like. Don't necessarily maybe sacrifice a little to win, bet a little to win a lot on those to make sure that you're cashing, and then go completely gonzo on the other ones. Just go free with 4 or 5, you know, and it could be 12-1 with 6-1 and 8-1, you know, where your bankroll is not going to get torn up, but you're going to cash when you hit them, because they won't. Even if the computer guys have that number covered, they won't have it covered like you do, you know. And I think if you can, you know, that's my new strategy. That's what I'm trying to do. Again, it's more of a strategy than at this point than something that's worked. But
so let me make sure I understand what you said. So you had like your 1, 3, 11 tier, and you're saying,
yeah,
for a while there you were trying to be really tight even on the 11s, and it was mentally tough because you were, you know, getting, you know, just missing on
and
scores.
I'll tell you, I did it even further. I'll go even further on that. I wasn't playing the 1s and the 3s. My idea was I'm just going to play the 11s, and I'm going to play the 11s tight, and that's it. And I would pass races and races that I wouldn't normally play. And I think it was a mistake. I mean, I think I was a little unlucky. I think I had some success a little bit, but I just think I'm trying to do something that's too hard. I came to the conclusion I was trying to do something that's too hard by doing that. So
it's high variance, right? You're going to have a lot of tough beats and losing streaks.
Yeah.
So you said So now what you're doing is you went back to your old style on the 11s. You're going to play it the way you used to. Just take your medicine and know that you're not going to get as much as you used to get on those, but you still think that those strong opinions, there's an edge there, and you bet it like you used to, and you don't have nearly as much variance. But when you got a 1 or a 3 opinion, that's where you're going to do the tight, go for it.
Right.
Expect to have long losing streaks, but you're only betting a lot less, and hopefully, you know, you can play enough races like that where in the long run you come out ahead, and the majority of your money is in those other bets where the edge is less, but the variance is lower.
That's my logic on it. You know, we'll see. I mean, that's what I've been doing, and I like the strategy. I like that for me at least, to go forward. I mean, you know, everybody's different. Everybody can handle, you know, everybody's going to look at it differently. That's a great thing about horse racing. Everybody comes at it from a different angle, but that's kind of my strategy to going forward. And that's what I would probably say to somebody.
But from the handicapping part of it, you're not really changing much, other than we talked about the other things that are forcing you to change, like, you know, the new rules around the drugs and HISA and, you know, that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I think that without a doubt, I mean, you know, the thing that the replays are so accessible now that you definitely notice that the trip horses are getting bet more than they used to. But I think the idea of handicapping hasn't changed much, and you know, I think everybody would, if anything, you know, the handicapping is better because it's shorter fields. That's why favorites win more now, and you know, there's less chaos from race to race. So I don't think that's, you know, why horses win really haven't changed.
So in targeting races, though, do you like more chaos or less chaos?
In general, more. You know, I think everybody does it. You know, everybody will say that you know, the more fields. I think there's a point. You know, I think there's a point to where it gets. My father always said that 14 horses is too much. He thought that was too much chaos. You know, back in the day, he didn't like excessive fields. You know, he thought somewhere between 10 and 12 was ideal, and he said anything more than that was too much. And he's probably right. You know, but in this day and age with the CRWs, you know, I think you got to get into, you know, you got to get into some of that. You know, obviously we don't have 14 horse fields, so it's kind of make believe. But you know, I mean, the CRWs in the old days would not play the Kentucky Derby because they thought that it was too hard. You know, I mean, that they wouldn't. You know, they didn't have a model, so a lot of them quit. They wouldn't even try to play it. You know, I mean, to me, that kind of proves it.
Yeah, I mean, it would be a model they can use once a year. So
Yeah, that
it's
too.
probably,
Yeah, that.
you know, it's a big investment to build the model. So is it worth it for one race?
Yeah, that's true. Good point. Yeah.
All
right,
so
Chris, this has been fun.
Yeah.
I can't believe anybody is going to really sit through 3 hours, but.
Well, we didn't quite make 3 hours, so you didn't set the record for the longest podcast.
Okay,
but
good.
The time for me, it's been great. It didn't seem like 3 hours at all. And like I said, people who listen to this don't have to sit down and listen to it all the time. Plus, they usually put it on like 1.5x speed. So we'll be talking like this really fast. And so they can turn 3 hours into 2 hours or pretty quickly. But
yeah,
anyway,
I'll call you
really
next week, and you and I will go over some stuff. You can tell me where I was wrong.
No. This has been great. And I would, you know, what, like you said, there's a whole handicapping side of this I'd love to get into at someday, because I know just from the times we've chatted, you have really good ideas on the handicapping side. So, but this was more on the betting. That's why we call it Bet with the Best. And really appreciate you hanging in with me for this time. It's kind of late where you're at, but you said you're kind of a night owl anyway. So hopefully it's not too late. But I really appreciate it. And I'm sure the listeners will appreciate it. And I appreciate the listeners as well. And may you boldly go where no horse player has gone before.